when Prabhupada left, of course, we knew his health was bad and we knew he didn't have much time. We just didn't know when. And of course, that day was horrible for me. Maybe one of the worst days, maybe the worst day of my life. But I think there was a point, and this sounds completely crazy, but I just wanted to relate this to those who hadn't seen Prabhupada. There was a point where it was so difficult, especially a few years later when the movement was running into trouble. I really felt Prabhupada's absence like tremendously because he was protecting us and we didn't realize how much he was protecting us. And I had this thought, of course not serious, but I had this thought, perhaps it would have been better that I never met Prabhupada, because if I had never met him, I wouldn't have to experience this pain. So I just wanted to share with was extremely difficult in ways that you'll never have to experience when he left, and what we had to face in maintaining his movement and what we still have to face. And that's just it's not a statement of any Siddhanta. That's just a statement of my own experience. And I think the other thing, and this is also not an analysis, I'm a very analytical person, but I'm just speaking now more emotionally, that as our movement ran into difficulties, it started to become a much different movement than it was when Prabhupada was with us. And one of the things I think we took for granted was how well we were protected by Prabhupada. And when he was no longer with us, we kind of knew instinctively it was going to be problematic, but we didn't know specifically how. We weren't, but we were hopeful at the same time that we could make it work. At least that was the emotion I was experiencing, and that's what I was experiencing. That's what I was feeling and being told from other people, like this is going to be difficult, but the responsibility is on our shoulders. So we're going to make it happen for Prabhupada. And we started running into difficulties. And it was at that point, at least for me, that I could never understand how well protected we were by Prabhupada, siddhantically and in so many ways, until he was no longer with us. And we were seeing some of our senior men having trouble. Not in a lifetime of Brahma would we ever have imagined these people would have ever had trouble. And then it started to become obvious that Prabhupada's mercy was protecting all of us. And now, at this point in my life, especially at the point when I decided that I should do the service of taking disciples, one side of me said, you know, this is ridiculous. Like, who do you think you are? Of course, the other side of me is that, well, Prabhupada wants you to do this, so who do you think you are not to do it? And my personal feeling is I kind of feel like I'm a car and Prabhupada's the engine. And so as long as I serve him, I get the engine. But without getting his mercy, I'm nothing more than a car. I'm just a shell. But Prabhupada fills me up. And this is just my personal experience. I never really felt on my own that I was very Krishna conscious. I felt very inclined to the philosophy, but in terms of core basics, foundational samskars of Krishna consciousness, I felt that was all coming from Prabhupada by his mercy. And that was the engine that was driving me. And that was the engine that was driving ISKCON. And without that, we're nothing. So what happened when Prabhupada left, that engine was harder to start, both for us individually and for the movement. It was running really well, but after he left, it required more maintenance, more oil changes, more tune-ups. It required more work. And so I think one of the biggest, I was giving a talk this morning, giving a class on Prabhupada, and I think a thought that we all have is, why did Prabhupada leave when we were so young? Why did Krishna allow him to go? It seems like I think we were feeling this way, maybe Anuttama and and Maharaj and Rukmini, you can say if you were feeling this way. But to me, it seemed like that was the greatest injustice that Krishna ever had committed, as he let Prabhupada leave so soon, because we weren't ready. We all knew we weren't ready. At least that's how I was like this. You can't allow this to happen. This is a travesty. At least that's how I felt. And so I was trying to make sense of that this morning and thinking, well, would it have been any better if Prabhupada waited 10 years or 20 years? And I think that protection bubble, it had to be removed for us to grow, because I think we all thought we were much more Krishna conscious than we were until Prabhupada left. And then after he left, it was like, oh, so the engine's not running so well now. Oh, you thought it was always a sports car and you wouldn't have to maintain it. So I started feeling like perhaps it was Prabhupada's divine arrangement just telling us, you have to grow up and you have to grow up now. And I think all of us who went through that experienced this very, very difficult time when we were feeling Prabhupada's separation intensely, and we didn't know how to get it, and we didn't know what to do. And then the movement started having difficulty, and that intensive, it was totally salt on the wound. You know, it just, when the movement was having difficulties, it was just a reminder, Prabhupada's not here, and that's why we're having difficulties. And who can I talk to? And even if I think I know the solution, nobody's going to listen to me. I'm not in charge. And Prabhupada's not here. I can't talk to him and tell him. And then gradually, I think all of us had to make sense of everything in a way that the only way we could be sane was we had to find Prabhupada's association through all of this. Otherwise, we would go crazy, or we would just leave ISKCON or leave Vaishnavism. And we started understanding more deeply Prabhupada's mood, Prabhupada's heart, dedicating ourselves to his mission. That's specifically, we had to realize what Rukmini is saying. Prabhupada's in his instructions, because that, and service, because that's the only way we could associate. It was so, I remember when Prabhupada would come to LA, because basically I was in LA and San Diego, and he would always come there. And when he would come, it was like, oh, we just got our injection for the year. And we all felt that 3 days was great, that we're good for the year now. One of my godbrothers, he went to greet Prabhupada at the airport, and he said, today I will distribute 108 Bhagavad Gitas. And I said, how are you going to do it? He said, well, I just have to see Prabhupada. So Prabhupada came through. I saw him at the airport. I said, you're okay for 108? He goes, yeah, I'll do it. And he did it. So, you know, for some of us, that's all we needed was those 3 days or that one darshan, and we were good. And now Prabhupada's gone. And so now, now what do? We had to get that association through his instructions. And I think Prabhupada knew that. It's like, okay, this is what real Krishna consciousness is, not my body, my instruction. And I think we would all say, I think we all agree now, we're closer to Prabhupada than we ever were. We had to become closer to survive, because we didn't have the body. So I don't think anyone should feel that separation is really undesirable. And then Prabhupada many times said it's more desirable. And so I always think, okay, Prabhupada said it's more desirable. So he said it, it must be. And I just have to keep digging through his service and his instructions to feel very, very intensely that I'm close to him and he's close to me. And I'll never leave him, and he'll never leave me, because he'll always be there by his instructions. And I think that's what we've all done. And I think we all feel closer than ever. And Anuttama, you know, all the book distributors would rather be on, when Prabhupada came to the temple, they would rather be on book distribution during the day than just hanging out with Prabhupada, feeling like, I'm not really close. I'm closer selling his books. So I think that it's the same thing now. And we were forced to understand this. And so all those who never met Prabhupada, you have access in the same way. And just as we have been forced to understand it, you also can access Prabhupada in that way. And I think I'll stop there. Thank you for letting me speak.
Wow, thank you so much, Mahatma. That was wonderful. I'm really amazed at the realizations you had just shared with us.
Thank you.
It's just amazing that these things are part of history and they're a part of our lives. And somehow through a time when there was a Prabhupada, and we lived through a time when there wasn't a Prabhupada now. And somehow we are carrying on. And yet it's not exactly clear sailing. It's not exactly like we know where we're going. So
The bubble has been
Prabhupada,
popped.
yeah, gave us some things. At the same time, he gave us a an interesting curveball, and we're still trying to figure out how to do it. So please, Anuttama, you come forward and give us some of your realizations. Thank you very much, Mahatma.
Hare Krishna.
Well, thank you, Mahatma Prabhu. Yeah, I just jotted down some thoughts I'd just like to share. It was more kind of reflecting in the sense of what's the meaning of this day to us. And sometimes I know, like on Prabhupada's appearance day, we hear devotees say, well, you know, this is Prabhupada's disappearance day, but my guru's appearance day is some other time. Or maybe those that have actually had their gurus physically lead, then this is Prabhupada's disappearance day, but my Guru Maharaj left on a different time. I was just reflecting that Prabhupada is more than the guru for some of us. You know, we think of who were you initiated by? You know, Prabhupada is more than the guru for some of us. And Rukmini quoted this expression that I find very inspiring, that Prabhupada is the preeminent Siksha guru for all of us. You know, he's the primary, and the founder Charya Viscon. He's the one that created this whole community and clarified our methodologies of worshiping the deities. And as Mahatma said, with the book distribution and open temples and so many things. And the rest of us are all following his footsteps. And the fact is, this is just the kind of the second generation or the first generation after Prabhupada. But we know that many, many gurus will come and go over the next centuries. But Srila Prabhupada will always stay. So again, there's sometimes this tendency to think, well, I'm more separate from Prabhupada than the person who's giving me physical instruction, the person that initiates me. But actually, these personalities, all of us, we're gonna go, but Prabhupada's gonna stay. So in that way, today really it's not just an important day for all the disciples of Prabhupada, as sometimes people think, but it's really an important day for all ISKCON devotees and friends. Because without Prabhupada, none of us would be here. There would be no here to be part of. It wouldn't exist. And in that way, you know, our own Siksha gurus, our Diksha gurus, the GBC members, temple presidents, our spouses, our mentors, our God brothers, God sisters, no one would be here without Prabhupada. So I think that's important for us to remember, and in a practical way, to really meditate on, we need to now, excuse me, and always in the future, look to Prabhupada for what was Prabhupada's vision on this. You know, sometimes the Christian friends, they say things like, well, you know, what would Jesus do, right? If Jesus was here now, what would Jesus do about this particular thing? So I think it's important that we also go really deep in trying to understand Prabhupada's mood, Prabhupada's vision, Prabhupada's guidance, Prabhupada's character, and we understand these things and try to see how can we be following in Prabhupada's footsteps. You know, Prabhupada, we see Prabhupada was so humble in the way he interacted with the devotees. I'm just, I've been rereading the Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita recently, and I just go back again to Mukunda Raj's book, Miracle on 26 Second Avenue, and then Shyama Sundar's books, and all these beautiful, so many biographies there about Prabhupada's mood, how he was joyful, how he was humble, how he was practical, and he wasn't limited by anything. You know, this is an important mood. You know, Prabhupada said there's a famous example of the Caitanya Charnarita about, you know, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. But for Prabhupada, nothing was impossible. This is the person who we're following. This is the person that created our organization. You know, he crossed the ocean, was as a sannyasi, he married young couples. That's completely against the rules. Prabhupada, he created the Brahmacharini ashrams. I mean, where's that in the tradition itself? When he first came, I always find it so amazing. One story that comes back to me again and again and again, when he was staying at the Agarwals, he was actually in Butler. He was actually at the YMCA. He came to their home in the evenings to lecture, And it's described one time he came a little early and Sally Agrawal said, "Oh, Swamiji, I haven't cleaned things up yet," because they were meat eaters. Prabhupada just came from Vrindavan. He's staying with people that are meat eaters. And she said, "Swamiji, the smell must disturb you." Prabhupada's response could have been so many things. "Oh, yes, you should give it up. Yeah, this is terrible. So much bad karma." Prabhupada was such a gentleman. He said to her, "Oh, think nothing of it." And we can imagine how disturbing. If I drive by or walk down an alley, you know, like there's a Burger King within a block, it's disgusting. And you know, I come from a culture that does all those things, but Prabhupada was completely undisturbed because of his compassion and his vision. So two things I wanted to read, just it's one real short. Just an example is I came across this recently. I think something very few of us would know or think about. It's from page 260 in the Lilamrita volume 1, Beyond the Lower East Side, volume 2. Mr. Chatty, one paragraph before. Prabhupada led the chanting of Hare Krishna for 20 minutes, cautioning the devotees to respond softly so that the neighbors would not pour water through the ceiling again, although they hadn't done that recently. Prabhupada always tried to cooperate with the tenants, but occasionally someone would start a petition, which never amounted to much, against the devotees. Sometimes Prabhupada would help the landlord, Mr. Chatty, by taking out the other tenant's garbage or just giving him a hand. I want to read that again. Sometimes Prabhupada would help the landlord, Mr. Chatty, by taking out the other tenant's garbage or just giving him a hand. And I just find that, again, what's the mood of our founder Acharya? I mean, we can imagine, he just came from Vrindavan. I mean, higher class people don't touch the garbage in India. What to speak of in Vrindavan? What to speak New Yorkers' garbage? What to speak of what was in that garbage? And just because this is the landlord, Prabhupada saw in order to push his movement forward, he needed to maintain good relationships with the landlord. And he would help him take out and this is before the day that, you know, those of us that are younger, maybe you think all garbage is forever and tied up in nice, clean plastic garbage bags. Wasn't so in those days. There were no nice, clean garbage bags. You threw stuff in a can and pretty abominable. But Prabhupada would help him take out not the devotees' garbage, the neighbor's garbage, which again, that in itself just speaks so much to me about the nature of Prabhupada and his humility. And then a statement, a famous verse I just wanted to reference, but again, trying to understand what's Prabhupada's mood, because this is Prabhupada's movement, it's Prabhupada's mood, and we need to understand it very deeply, because I remember I was in Mayapur in 1978, just after Prabhupada passed away, and I remember Satsvarup Maharaj gave a class one day and said, we all have to remember Prabhupada is the founder of this movement. Some people may came and try to maybe say, well, we're going to do it my way or this way or that way, change the mood. He said, but nobody should try to do that. So in the same way, we have to be really deeply educated about what is Prabhupada's mood and his vision. So here's a verse, 731, on a topic that's of interest these days. Seeing that the Mayavadis and others were fleeing, Lord Chaitanya thought, I wanted everyone to be immersed in this inundation of love of Godhead, but some of them have escaped. Therefore, I shall devise a trick to drown them also. Here's what Prabhupada really reveals his preaching mood. He writes, here is an important point. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to invent a way to capture the Mayavadis and others who did not take interest in the Krishna consciousness movement. This is a symptom of an Acharya. An Acharya who comes to the service of the Lord cannot be expected to conform to a stereotype, for he must find the ways and means by which Krishna consciousness may be spread. Sometimes jealous persons criticize the Krishna consciousness movement because it engages equally both boys and girls in distributing love of Godhead. Not knowing that boys and girls in countries like Europe and America mix very freely, these fools and rascals criticize the boys and girls in Krishna consciousness for intermingling. But these rascals should consider that one cannot suddenly change a community's social customs. However, since both the boys and the girls are being trained to become preachers, those girls are not ordinary girls, but are as good as their brothers who are preaching Krishna consciousness. Therefore, to engage both boys and girls in fully transcendental activities is a policy intended to spread the Krishna conscious movement. These jealous fools who criticize the intermingling of boys and girls will simply have to be satisfied with their own foolishness because they cannot think of how to spread Krishna consciousness by adopting ways and means that are favorable for this purpose. Their stereotyped methods will never help spread Krishna consciousness. So again, and I think it's essential we really know what's Prabhupada's mood. You know, we know the structures, but we have to go back and see what is Prabhupada's mood and be very protective of Prabhupada's mood and not let it be minimized. And I just a little more evidence of this. I happen to be walking through my kitchen this evening. I don't know who this person is. It doesn't really matter, but I think you'll all see quite significant. This is a lady in a sari. I don't know if you can see it properly, receiving Gayatri mantra from His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. You may not you may recognize that person. That is Prabhupada, obviously. But anyway, that's Prabhupada. Prabhupada giving Gayatri, chanting right into her ear. Okay. Another interesting, just, you know, walk through your kitchen. You might find similar photographs, similar. This is another one. Prabhupada accepting a garland. Again, reflection is not so good. Can you see that, Mahatma? Can you see that?
Yeah, the reflection is pretty bad. You can see mostly your computer screen.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm not sure what to do about that. Anyway, Prabhupada accepting a garland from a lady. How's that? Better, huh? Prabhupada accepting a garland from a lady disciple. So I think we have to really pray. I'll conclude, you know, we have to pray that we adopt Prabhupada's mood, that we're very strict with ourselves, but we're very merciful to others, and that we're always ready to do whatever is necessary to share bhakti, to share devotional service with one and all, and not to discriminate. Prabhupada is very much against discrimination. So I'll just finish with this. I was thinking this is Prabhupada's disappearance day. Rukmini said a similar thing. I think we have to be very, very careful. Although it's his disappearance day, we have to guard against, to make sure this is, that we don't, his presence doesn't disappear and his mood doesn't disappear. That I think is an essential thing for us to remember and think about on his disappearance day, not to let his presence disappear or his mood disappear. And I'll stop with that. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you very much, Uttama. We're definitely getting nectar today. There's a lot more to come too, even some of our recorded sessions. We previewed them this morning, these recorded sessions were pretty interesting too. We'll get to them later with Jayapataka Swami, Devamrta Swami, and Kadamba Kanana, as well as Adi from locally. He gave a little short explanation too. This is an amazing day, actually. I feel blessed, you know, for all the association we're getting here. I asked Krishnarupa from Australia to speak. I wanted to get more ladies into the flow today, so luckily Rukmini agreed to speak and Krishnarupa agreed to speak. Malati will be speaking later. I had, unfortunately, Arundhati has some problem and she couldn't speak. She was not feeling well. And Guru Garanga also canceled out, and a couple of other people canceled out for physical reasons. So let me, since Krishnarupa has a program that she has to attend, let me ask her to come to the fore here and speak something for us all to hear. Hare Krishna.
You're muted, Krishnarupa.
I'm unmuted. Vanchakalpas, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak early in the piece. I'm so useless. I should be the very, very last person to speak, but I have a program at New Govardhan that I have to attend. We're kind of open at the moment, so I've got to rush off to that. But just a point Anuttama Prabhu made, that you were showing us those wonderful pictures of Prabhupada giving women Gayatri. Prabhupada, actually, when I got first and second initiation together, and I was a brahmacharini in Calcutta Temple. This was from the beginning of 74, and they needed a pujari for Lord Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. Narayani was Radha Govinda's head pujari, and Madhuri was worshipping Lord Chaitanya. And Gargamuni Maharaj wrote to Prabhupada and said that we have a nice Australian Bhaktin here. I would really like, would you consider giving her first and second initiation together, because we really need a pujari for Lord Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. So Prabhupada agreed. So the only reason I got first and second together was Prabhupada, understood the need, and I was their Lordship's pujari for a year and a half. And so that was, and we worshipped the deities, we did artis, everything, etc. in Calcutta. At the time, of course, Mayapur, there were practically no women, but they didn't do puja to the deities. And then when I went to Vrindavan in Janmashtami 74, Prabhupada initiated me. And that's why the name he gave me, Krishnarupa Dasi, servant of the form of Krishna, always resonates with me, because it was like Prabhupada was having a little bit of a joke that I'm giving you first and second because you're going to be worshipping Lord Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. So at that point, we went into Prabhupada's room completely by ourselves. So there was just me and just Srila Prabhupada. And I came into the room, offered my obeisances to Prabhupada, shaking like a leaf, of course, never having been in such close proximity to Prabhupada without anyone else there. And then Prabhupada asked me a question. He said, "So you're from Calcutta?" And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." And he said, "So, do any of the men go upstairs to the women's quarters?" And for anyone, Rukmini would remember what the women's quarters were like in Calcutta Temple. They were at the back of the temple room. You'd have to go up some stairs, you'd have to be fighting off the big rats that were the size of cats. And you go upstairs, and in order to go upstairs, you'd have to go through the men's bathroom. In order to go through to the temple area, you'd have to, again, go through the men's bathroom. But Prabhupada was concerned about the ladies. Were we being taken care of? Was everything going okay? Was your, your safe space still a safe space for you? And I said, Srila Prabhupada, no men come upstairs, except sometimes they come to get their suitcases, because the men would keep their suitcases up on the roof under some cover. And then Prabhupada beckoned to me, and I went around Prabhupada's desk, and I sat literally right next to Srila Prabhupada. I was half an inch away from him. And he held out the lotus palm of his hand that was soft and pink. And then he told me to hold out my hand. So my hand was next to his hand. And then he showed me how to chant Gayatri. And it was an experience that, 40 odd years, 47 years later, is so, close to my heart. I can never forget that. And, Prabhupada didn't make, differences between the men and the women, particularly in those days. There was no question of it. Anyway, because you were talking about and showing us that wonderful picture, I thought I might like to share that with everyone. And miraculously, I didn't stumble over the Sanskrit, and I must have pronounced it properly. And yes, it was a very, very wonderful experience. So I've actually written something. So if you will bear with me while I read this. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravan Pacharani Nidasesa Sundari Paspachadi Zatari. And I'd like to start with a quote that I saw yesterday, and this is from Srila Prabhupada. As Lord Krishna's appearance and disappearance are all spiritual, transcendental, they are not ordinary things. Similarly, Lord Krishna's devotee, his representative, who is sent to this material world for preaching the glories of Lord Krishna, their appearance and disappearance is also like Krishna's. Therefore, according to Vaishnava principles, the appearance and disappearance of the Vaishnava is considered all auspicious. And that just popped out at me yesterday when I was looking up something else. And it's really like, you know, we've heard this analogy before. It's like the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun are both equally beautiful. So Srila Prabhupada's appearance for us is great, great joy. And Prabhupada's disappearance for us is also great joy, because we know that Krishna has taken Prabhupada, took Prabhupada back with him. But for us, of course, as his disciples and grand-disciples and great-grand-disciples and so on for perpetuity, it's always a very sad day as well. Because we're reminded, especially for those of us who were, you know, Prabhupada's initiates, that we saw Prabhupada, etc. For us, it's a very poignant, sad day, because we're not able to see him again in that form on this planet. And Mukunda Maharaj gave a very wonderful Bhagavatam class this morning at New Govardhan, and he was talking about when Srila Prabhupada departed and what it meant for him. So it really reminded me, well, for all of us, how we're not going to see or hear that resounding cry of jubilance, Prabhupada is here, Prabhupada's here, Prabhupada's here, which is a catch cry for all of us that filled our hearts with joy because Prabhupada is arriving in our temples. So we have to wait a while before we can hear that again. So, and one thing I mentioned to Maharaj in class this morning was that even though we knew Srila Prabhupada was very ill, we knew it was just a matter of time. We've been praying for a long time. Oh, my dear Lord Krishna, if it is your desire, please make Srila Prabhupada well. But when we actually got the news that Prabhupada had left, it was, sure, it was a terrible shock to me, and I'm sure all of my God brothers and God sisters would say the same thing, that we didn't actually have a full understanding that Prabhupada was going to leave us. We thought he would be with us forever. And of course he is. On a philosophical platform, he is with us. He's always there in our heart. The more we think of Prabhupada, the more we glorify Prabhupada, the more he is connecting with us, so that we can understand. So a blessing that I'm asking Srila Prabhupada to give me, and I'm asking all of my revered God brothers and God sisters and the assembled devotees to give me, that I will remain a faithful servant to Prabhupada for the rest of my life. And indeed for as long as it takes, probably would take many lifetimes. But just one moment's association with a devotee like Srila Prabhupada, pure devotee of the Lord, is enough to free us from our ghastly life, or from my ghastly life. And that very first darshan I had of Srila Prabhupada, which was in Melbourne Temple, 1973, stays with me forever. It was a, what's the word I can use? It was a light switch moment. That second I saw Prabhupada, I had immediate conviction. I'd only been a devotee for a few weeks. And then when I saw him, it was like, yes, this is my eternal spiritual master. The impact was so powerful on me. And I've gone through different phases in my life. You know, I've had the ups and I've had the downs, and I've had some lulls in my enthusiasm. But Prabhupada never gave up on me. And somehow or other, in a cosmic plan of epic proportions, I'm indeed captured forever. So I beg your blessings that, you know, for the next whatever 10, 15, 20, 25 years that I stay dedicated. And recently I was reading in 5th canto, it's chapter 4, verse 5. And it's the verse about, and it's a purport about Jivan Mukta. And Jivan Mukta, as you know, is a person who is already liberated even in this body. And of course, you know, we understand that Prabhupada is a Nityasiddha, he's eternally liberated soul. But when I was reading this purport, I couldn't help but think about Prabhupada and his qualities. So, and because Krishna really wanted to glorify Prabhupada, he didn't make it easy. Just like Anuttama Prabhu was saying, it wasn't easy. And why did Krishna not make it easy for his beloved devotee, Srila Prabhupada? And we can understand he didn't make it easy because he wanted Prabhupada to get the glory. If he made it easy, it was, had Prabhupada came, had lots and lots of big donors and immediately started temples and wasn't taking out the trash to help the landlord, or lined up in the bath, in the queue to use the bathroom with the other devotees, some of the devotees standing before him, not giving Prabhupada first turn. We wouldn't appreciate the wonderful stature of our Srila Prabhupada. And, and Prabhupada, I mean, there's those wonderful stories of where Prabhupada saw Narada Muni. And Jamuna writes that about, there's a kirtan in Berry Place. And Prabhupada was, there was a kirtan going on, and Prabhupada suddenly started singing, Narada Muni Bhajai Vina. And, kept on repeating that verse. And then, there's a very long story about that, which I won't read out, but Jamuna writes, I looked up and he looked down at me, signaling me to carry on the kirtan. So I continued chanting Hare Krishna, and he continued singing his prayer to Narada Muni into the microphone. Then he started leading with me. We could all understand, she writes, that something inexplicable and amazing was happening. Everyone was jumping, high in the air. Little baby Sarasvati, I think, was 2 feet off the ground, she writes. And we jumped off the stage, and she says it's one of those Krishna magic moments. And then the next morning she asked Prabhupada what had happened. And Prabhupada said, didn't you see? Narada Muni came to our kirtan. No, I didn't see him, Jamuna answered. And Prabhupada said, yes, Narada Muni came. And there's that other story in the States where Prabhupada had a little asana made for Narada Muni. And during one kirtan, Prabhupada started to laugh. And they asked Prabhupada later, why were you laughing? He said, oh, Narada Muni came. And he was laughing. And they said, oh, why? Srila Prabhupada was Narada Muni laughing. And he said, because he was laughing to see all the milechas chanting Hare Krishna. So we don't know who Prabhupada is. We just know he's the best person we have ever met in our entire lives and will probably ever meet. And we are all his devoted servants. So Prabhupada, he sacrificed such austerities, had the disappointments in Jhansi with the League of Devotees. I'm just reading Lilamrita too with the Bhaktins in Yugovardhana Brahmacharinis, and we're to that point where Prabhupada established League of Devotees in Jhansi, and all his disappointments there when they took the temple space away from him. And then, of course, he had all those troubles and travails with trying to print the Back to Godhead magazine, and he actually did not have enough food to eat. Our Srila Prabhupada did not have food, but that money he saved to print his Back to Godhead. So, such austerities. We know he suffered the heart attacks. He was going to Boston, not knowing anyone except some, relative of an acquaintance. So Prabhupada's our transcendental heroes, the likes that this planet has not seen before. And he's, with a mundane consideration even, he's beyond Ernest Shackleton and beyond Shakespeare. He set an unparalleled path for the world to follow. And just like Uttama was saying, Prabhu was saying, it's our duty as his disciples, as his grand disciples, as his great grand disciples, and going on and on and on in austerity. It's our duty, our solemn duty, that we must do exactly what Prabhupada wanted. Don't change anything. Just, he gave us instructions, we must follow them. He gave women Gayatri, he gave women all the lines of Gayatri. He allowed them to do deity worship, he allowed them to preach. He encouraged them, not even allowed is the wrong word, he encouraged them to preach. And even in front of him, they led kirtans, they led class, gave classes. So we just have to follow Prabhupada's mood. And in the purport to that verse, Prabhupada writes, Srila Viraraghavacharya states in the Chandogya Upanishad, there are 8 symptoms of a Jivan Mukta, a person who is already liberated even when living in this body. The first symptom is of one so liberated is that he is free from all sinful activity, apahata papa. So Srila Prabhupada, there was never a time that you did not remember Krishna. You yourself said, I could not remember a time that I did not remember Krishna. You were trained by a great Vaishnava parents in a saintly home, trained in a pure lifestyle. You never did, any sinful things. And in your home, not even a grain of rice was wasted. The whole family home was immersed in Krishna Bhakti. And then you continue to write that another symptom of such a person is vijara, which indicates that he's not subjected to all the miseries of old age. And we've seen, Prabhupada, that, despite his ill health, his preaching was indefatigable. He could not stop preaching. And, as Mukunda Maharaj was saying in class this morning at Govardhan, that right up to the very last minute, Prabhupada was translating Srimad Bhagavatam. And he was reminding us that the pain was so severe that the Kaviraj says if an ordinary person was suffering the pain Srila Prabhupada was suffering, they would be crying in agony. And what was Srila Prabhupada doing? Translating Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm nearly finished. Do I have a bit more time, Chandrasekhara Maharaj?
It's kind of, we've got a lot of people on. I appreciate your exuberance and.
So I won't continue, but
okay,
there are.
Go ahead if you could do it in a minute or two.
Yes, well, I'll go quickly. So the other symptom is vimritu. A liberated person prepares himself in such a way that he does not take any more material bodies. So we know that Prabhupada has gone back to Krishna. Another symptom is vishoka. He's callous to material distress and happiness. And we could see with Mr. Nair and all the trouble that he caused in Bombay. Still, Srila Prabhupada was determined and he did not let that prevent him. He no longer desires any material enjoyment. And in deep humility, Prabhupada would pray, "Dear Krishna, please never let me fall into Maya." And he would remind his disciples, the problem with my disciples is they're not afraid enough of Maya. And another one is apipata, that he has no desire other than to engage in devotional service. And it continues. So I won't take up very valuable time, but I just want to say, of course, that wonderful conclusion, the reasons ill who say that Vaishnavas died and now are living still in sound. The Vaishnavas died to live and living spread the holy name around. So let's continue to glorify Srila Prabhupada on the sunrise and the sunset, and may all of his followers for generations to come do the same. Hare Krishna, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for your patience.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much, Krishnarupa. It's like a breath of fresh air there from Australia. I feel like it's early morning there or something like that. It's very late here.
It's 10 a.m. It's 10 a.m.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I feel, very inspired by the speakers that we've had opening up here. I see that Jayadvaita Swami is on, and he wanted to speak through this little segment, and then after him we'll go to Yogeshwar, so should work out that way. So Jayadvaita Swami, are you out there? You can hear me.
I am. Let me start video. There we are. Thank you. It's hard to be before Yogeshwar Prabhu because Yogeshwar Prabhu speaks so eloquently. I'm always so really impressed by how thoughtfully and cogently he speaks. The yeah. Okay. Tamam Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Vanchakolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. One thought that I've had about Srila Prabhupada is how impressive it is that he attracted so many different kinds of people and was able to engage so many different kinds of people. And everyone had his own way of understanding Srila Prabhupada and appreciating Srila Prabhupada. When you read some of the memoirs that are being published, they're so different in their mood, in their approach, and in their view of Srila Prabhupada. Shamsundar's is so different from Hari Sari, and again from Mukunda Maharaj, and again from others. Prabhupada one time said that another person Prabhupada attracted was a Treya Rishi, who was a person from the high finance world. He was working for Arthur Young at the time. He started the Iranian Tehran branch of Arthur Young, the accountancy firm. So Atreya had written to Srila Prabhupada that it seemed like there were these clashes between devotees and that it was due to impersonalism. And Prabhupada wrote back and said, no, it's personalism. That because everyone is an individual, you can't expect some kind of, he wrote that also, some sort of utopian existence here, but that everyone is an individual eternally, and therefore there will be differences of opinion. And in ISKCON or among Srila Prabhupada's followers, there are differences of opinion. We were hearing yesterday from Giriraj Maharaj about the high-pitched differences of opinion in Prabhupada's last days between those who were insisting that Prabhupada has ordered us to he wants to go on a bullock cart and circumambulate Vrindavan, so we have to carry out his order and arrange for it. And those on the other side who said, he's going to die if you do that. We can't, he'll be in so much pain. The first bump in the road, he'll leave. So there was a high, really, what would you say? Just a ferocious kind of difference of opinion about that. With both sides committed to Prabhupada's service, thinking about how to please Prabhupada, how to serve Prabhupada. So and so still that carries on, and we can expect that into the future also, that there won't be just one view. But my point is that the one thing that everyone agrees on is the greatness of Srila Prabhupada, the influence of Srila Prabhupada, the their affection and love for Srila Prabhupada. And somehow Srila Prabhupada was able to attract so many different kinds of people. It's very sophisticated people of Bombay, people like Srinathji, who is very cultured and worldly wise person. And then hippies in the Lower East Side, and even crazy people. I remember one incident. This is New York. We were at some airport, and Prabhupada was leaving, I believe. And all the devotees are, one of those airport scenes that we used to have in those days. All the devotees were gathered around Srila Prabhupada. And this crazy boy started making his way through the crowd. And he was obviously mad. I mean, he had LSD kind of eyes and very unkempt appearance. He's wearing some sort of like cardboard sign that said something crazy. And he started making his way towards Srila Prabhupada. So, I'm seeing him, and as I see him getting closer to Srila Prabhupada, I start blocking him. And even but anyway, he somehow or other threw himself right in front of Prabhupada. And I think I and some others are ready to pull this fellow away. But Prabhupada was kind. No, let him, he just accepted that somehow or other he's surrendering. It didn't go beyond that. I don't have the rest, how he became a brilliant something. But Prabhupada saw and appreciated that there was some spirit there to surrender. Another time, this is Boston, I was assisting Govinda Dasi in serving Srila Prabhupada, and I brought Prabhupada his lunch. And as I was putting his plate before him, these big black ants started crawling on the prasadam. So I started to brush them away lightly. Prabhupada said, no. He said, let them play. They are also living entities. They are also living entities. So Prabhupada was kind not only to the human beings, but even to the ants, even to the lower creatures, even to the lower creatures, including the hippies of the Lower East Side. We were also lower creatures, maybe human beings of some sort, but Prabhupada was like that he saw some spark of Krishna consciousness and he would fan it. When Prabhupada first disappeared, one disciple of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who had been invited to speak, said anyway, he's incongruously, let's say, he said that I also could have had many disciples in the West if I'd been willing to accept hippies. And it was true that was Prabhupada's distinction, that Prabhupada, yes, anyone could have done what Srila Prabhupada done if they'd been willing, if they had the humility, if they had the tolerance, if they had the patience, if they had the vision, if they had the courage, if they had all the other qualities that Srila Prabhupada had, they also could have started the Hare Krishna movement in the West. They also could have spread it to Africa and China and Russia and Australia and all over the world. But those qualities were manifest in Srila Prabhupada to an extraordinary degree, not seen in others. Others may have been learned, others may have been cultured, others may have had many Vaishnava qualities, but it's Srila Prabhupada who manifested all of these qualities in such an extraordinary way and carried out the desire of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to whom he gave the credit. Tarishcha Balavan Paschachet Tan something Gorangiranam. Prabhupada in his poetry wrote that by the strong desire, Tar Ichcha Balavan, his desire is very powerful. Sri Siddhanta Saraswati Sachi Sutta Priyati, that he's very dear to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his desire is so strong that people all over the world will take up this chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada had this strong faith in the words of his spiritual master. And from that strong faith, along with intelligence and organization and all of the other qualities that merged in Srila Prabhupada, he was able to start the Krishna consciousness movement and maintain the Krishna consciousness movement and set up the Krishna consciousness movement in such a way that it's still going on 50 years later. It's a known phenomenon in the sociology of religion that generally after the disappearance of a charismatic leader, starts a social or religious or political movement, after his departure, the movement self-destructs, it falls apart, it loses its cohesion and disappears. Very few survive, actually. We hear about some that do survive, but mostly they disappear. But the Krishna consciousness movement is still going. It's still going. It survived the shock of Prabhupada's immediate departure. It survived the aftershock of events that took place after Srila Prabhupada's departure. It survived so many other attacks from outside and threats or ruptures or collapses or disasters from within. There's been pressure from outside. There's been problems from inside. Sometimes I've said that Prabhupada's power is so strong that he's made the Krishna consciousness movement so strong that even we can't sink it. It keeps on going. We've given it our best efforts and still it keeps going. That's Prabhupada's credit, and the credit of those who are dedicated to Srila Prabhupada, who've accepted responsibility on behalf of Srila Prabhupada, whether they're small devotees or they're the leaders of the movement. Those who are dedicated to Srila Prabhupada's instructions are carrying things forward. And next generations, I have some confidence, will carry things forward. So that's, on the one side, the credit of those who who follow. And on the other side, it's Srila Prabhupada's credit. That expression is there, that a person is a credit to his family or a credit to his parents, like that, a credit to his country, what have you. So those who follow Srila Prabhupada seriously become a credit to Srila Prabhupada. They add to his glories. They add to his glories. When the Krishna consciousness movement, as the Krishna consciousness movement spreads and accomplishes more and more, as it reaches more and more people and uplifts more and more people, those who are instrumental in making that happen by following Srila Prabhupada get credit for their accomplishments. And at the same time, they're a credit to Srila Prabhupada. They add to his glories. It's not that if somebody does something, it's somehow or other taking energy away from Prabhupada or distracting from Srila Prabhupada, or Prabhupada's not in the center or what have you. When Prabhupada's followers accomplish something, they add to Prabhupada's glories. If someone writes a book, if someone starts a temple, if someone does anything that's in compliance with Srila Prabhupada's instructions, then that person gets the credit and Srila Prabhupada himself gets the credit, because it's only by Prabhupada's mercy that these things can authentically happen. I think I've taken enough time, so I'll stop here. I see there are many qualified people to speak. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Jayadvaita Swami. We really appreciate. My hat's off to all the devotees who took the time both to come and decide to speak, and those who are coming to listen. This is kind of a rare moment, where we kind of look at the movement, we look at ourselves, and we look at Prabhupada, and we try to figure it out and scratch our heads where we are and where we're going. So thank you very much. And I want to turn the spotlight to Yogeshwar, who is here, and he always has some amazing realizations to give us. Yogeshwar, are you there?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for including me here. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. This is a difficult day for those of us who were privileged to have been with Srila Prabhupada. The day of his disappearance is very difficult. It's emotionally difficult. It's psychically difficult. It's intellectually difficult. It's difficult on so many levels. So for the younger among you joining us this evening, I'm going to kind of step out of character a little bit and share with you something that generally doesn't get talked about. My impression has been keeping as much as I do in contact with fellow old fogies from the first generation. I try to stay in contact with our God sisters and God brothers. It's my lifeline. We're a little special. Those of us who were with Srila Prabhupada were a little special. I don't think it's easy for the younger generation to get us, to understand why we behave strangely sometimes. It's because we were witness to something unique in history. I've been reading biographies of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lately, Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Mangal. And I'm just amazed what the community of Vaishnavas were privileged to see at that time had never been seen before in the history of the world, in the history of humanity. There had never been a descent of God experiencing the ecstasies that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu manifested, and people didn't know how to express it. They didn't know how to react to it. They were fainting left and right because it was hard to absorb. There was some of that for those of us who were with Srila Prabhupada. We were seeing something that was just beyond understanding. So what I want to tell you, you youngins out there, is that we, gray types in this we live with two emotions. We live with fear and we live with guilt. The fear, and I obviously you can't talk for everybody, but I think many of the older among us out there will identify with this. The fear is that we're seeing our God brothers and sisters, the people we grew up with in spiritual life, they're dropping around us. Left every day, there's someone else who's not there anymore. And it's tragic, and it, rips our heart in half, and we cry because we miss them so terribly. These people who understood what we went through, and we who understood what they went through because we were there together with Srila Prabhupada. And the clock is ticking. So we're next. And we know that time is short. So there's some fear about that. And it's connected to the other emotion, which is guilt. The guilt is that we never did enough to show him how much we love him. We never did enough. We dropped the ball. We did not get as far along as he would have wanted us to. And before he passed away, we were desperate to show him, we'll do this for you. We'll take over here. We'll make it right. And all of your dreams for the salvation of the world, we will work to help achieve that. But we didn't do it soon enough, and he didn't get to see it. And so these two emotions are kind of playing a tug of war in our heart. And my mom passed away about 6 weeks ago, and that was the second most jarring loss that I've had. Well, among others, I miss Bhakti Tirtha Swami, a lot of devotees I miss, but my mom and I grew up together, and she was a single parent and I was her only child. So emotionally, that was a very, very difficult experience, but there was a lot of learning that went through it. And it obliged me to think back to when Prabhupada passed away. And as devastating as that was, there were also things that have occurred as a consequence of that could not have happened while he was here. See, while he was here, there was always an ultimate arbiter. You see, when Prabhupada was here, there was always somebody we could go to who would answer every question we have. He had the right answer. And no matter how much friction there may have been between us, we all agreed that whatever Prabhupada said, we would do it. We would do it. He was the ultimate peacemaker. And when he was no longer there, those frictions didn't have that same automatic resolution that they had had when he was here. So it was a difficult time on so many levels. But since then, there are realizations that we've had about the responsibility that he handed to us. And here's what's wonderful. We may not have much confidence in ourselves, but he did. He had confidence in us. And that's what matters. It doesn't matter how little confidence you have in yourself. He entrusted us with this never before manifested mission of conveying to the entire world how to love God, how to know yourself as an eternal being, and how to love God. And some of the memories that come to mind have to do with patience. And that's very hard for me. One of the things that comes along with that sense of guilt of not having done enough for him, especially as you get older, is, okay, with whatever years I've got left, I'm going to get one more in for the Gipper. You know, I'm going to get one more big service in, and nobody's going to stop me. No one's going to stand in my way. I'm going to do this from Prabhupada. And it kind of, unfortunately, sends some people down a different road, where the more mature response would be to say, we've had our chance. We've had our opportunity. Let us now step back and allow the younger generation to make the mistakes, to learn by doing. And we will be there to mentor them, to guide them, to offer suggestions, but not to interfere. And I think sometimes the reason why there isn't, from my perspective, more young people coming up through the ranks is this sense of possessiveness that we've got to do this. And they don't understand, because they weren't with Prabhupada. They don't know what he was like. We do. So we're the only ones who can do this. And I think the time has come to step back away from that kind of possessiveness over the direction of things. And in that regard, I remember a couple of instances when I was with him. As often happened, people from India would come when there was a darshan with Srila Prabhupada, and some couldn't resist standing up and trying to impress him with how much Sanskrit they knew, you know, how many verses they knew from Bhagavad Gita. So this one gentleman in Paris was just going on, this verse, that verse, this verse, that. And it was all Mayavadi stuff, you know, we're all Krishna, we're all one. And I'm sitting listening to this going on. The room was full in Prabhupada's quarters in Paris. And I was afraid that Prabhupada was just going to explode at him. I mean, that's the kind of thing that he had no patience for. He had absolutely no, for someone to say, we're all Krishna. The thing to remember is that Prabhupada was a lover of God. He loved Krishna. He knew Krishna. So for somebody to say we're all Krishna was a slap in the face. And so I was ready for that. I was waiting for the explosion, and it didn't come. Prabhupada sat there and he sat there and he sat there. And then finally, this gentleman quoted a verse from Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada's eyes got very big. And he said, yes, he was sitting quietly the whole time. He said, yes, you have spoken very nicely. And then he quoted the verse back to him and said, now in this verse, Sri Krishna is explaining how the way to come to know me is through devotional service. And the man is standing there having been completely flattered by this great spiritual master. And in a sense, I think maybe unconsciously, he was looking to be put down. You can't be in an environment like that and go off on a tangent without knowing that there's going to be some kind of backlash. And it didn't come. Instead, Prabhupada was patient. He sat there patiently. And he waited for that one little moment, that one little opening when he could come in and say something encouraging to this gentleman. It was the most amazing display of patience, of an understanding of human psychology, you know, that I'm not going to do what this man wants, namely chastise him for being proud. Let me find a moment to encourage him. It was so beautiful. And there was another time like that when Jean Herbert came, this Sanskrit scholar from Geneva University, came to see Prabhupada. Herbert had actually met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in India. He had gone to India in the late 20s, I guess, early 30s, and had met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. But in the book that he wrote called Krishna, the Divine Lover, I think, it was filled with Mayavadi ideas. So obviously in India, he had also been hanging out with the Mayavadi types. Prabhupada, Guru Garanga gave Srila Prabhupada a copy of Jean Herbert's book. And I see Jyotirmaya is here with us. She gets the credit for having arranged a lot of these meetings. When Srila Prabhupada came to Europe, especially in Paris and Geneva, Jyotirmaya was the one who set up all these meetings with heads of state and leading professors and so on. So thank you so much, Jyotirmaya, for having done that. It was such an important service. And this one meeting, Guru Garanga had shown Srila Prabhupada Jean Herbert's book, and Prabhupada had leafed through it before he came. And Herbert came into the room, and Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, I'm very glad to meet you. I've been reading your book." And Jean Herbert, who was kind of husky, kind of sat down in front of Prabhupada's desk, and he said, "Yes, you know, Swamiji, do you know how long it took me to write that book? It took me 50 years to write that book." Prabhupada looked at the page and said, "Yes, and there are still mistakes." He said, "If you really want to know Krishna," and he pointed to us. I was there. Guru Garanga was there. I think Jyotirmaya was there. I don't remember. You'll have to tell me later. Some other devotees from the Geneva temple. He said, "If you want to know Krishna, you have to do like these young people. They've given up everything for Krishna. They've given up smoking, and they've given up sex, and they've given up drugs, and they're just performing devotional service. And this is the way to know Krishna, by giving up everything, and then you can know him." And Jean Herbert kind of chuckled a little bit and said, "Well, I smoke and I drink, and I don't want to give them up." And Prabhupada looked and said, "Yes, therefore you have a long way to go on your spiritual path. I would request you to read this book." And he handed him a copy of Nectar of Devotion. And he said, "If you have questions, please come back. I would love to speak with you again. I'm enjoying our conversation." He was very, very polite. And so Herbert got up and left. So after these kinds of meetings, when there was a little bit of someone with another point of view, we'd be sitting there, waiting for the, let's go to the videotape, right? We're gonna relive this, and Prabhupada's going to give us a blow by blow, and Prabhupada wasn't saying anything. He was just sitting there. So finally, Guru Garanga spoke up and he said, "He was a big demon, wasn't he, Srila Prabhupada?" Prabhupada said, no. He has become contaminated because he was in the association of Mayavadis when he was in India. But if you read his book, you'll see that he has written the name Krishna many, many times. That will benefit him greatly. We were floored. We were speechless. We were young and we were headstrong and, got, spit and vinegar in us and everything. And we were looking for the confrontation. And what Prabhupada did in moments like that was to describe for us that real preaching is to befriend someone. Real preaching is not to put somebody down. Real preaching is to be patient and allow someone to feel comfortable that they're welcome here. They may have an imperfect idea, but let them feel welcome. If you alienate them, what good will that do? And I think back on moments like that, because for me, it's so important, because I've got some of that bitterness in me that I never did enough for him. I live with that. I live with that emotion that I'm not a good disciple. I didn't do enough. And I'm impatient. I just turned 70 this year. And I'm really impatient, to get something done. So when I think back on those moments with Srila Prabhupada, what I remember was how patient he could be. Now, there were times he was very impatient. That was mostly with us. He saved that. He saved that impatience for us. We should know better as disciples. But when other people would come to the temple, he was ready to bend over backwards to make them feel appreciated, make them feel like they're most welcome to come back, and let's discuss this. We can come to an understanding. So I guess that's really what I wanted to say to the younger attendees here this evening is in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says one should move forward with undeviating determination and faith, and success is guaranteed for the rigid practitioner. Srila Prabhupada entrusted us with an impossible task: bring the whole world to Krishna's lotus feet. But remember something: the spiritual master never asks the disciple to do anything without also providing the disciple with the tools to do it. As impossible as the task may seem, Srila Prabhupada bestowed upon us the tools with which to achieve this impossible mission: the knowledge, the practices, the sadhana, the association, prasadam and kirtan, the holy names. All the tools are there. And so let's go forward together and encourage one another that it's not too late. There's time. Every moment is an opportunity to express to Srila Prabhupada our thanks and our appreciation for having provided us with something we do not deserve, but which we will now share with others as best we can, because that's what he wanted. Thank you. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Yogeshwar. It's obvious that Prabhupada is like a Vaidurya gem with many different colors coming from different angles. And by listening to different devotees in their views and expressions of their connection with Prabhupada, we see so many different sides, not only to our philosophy, but to Prabhupada himself, and to how the spiritual world really is something very amazing and something multidimensional. I would like to ask Abhiram to speak now, if he could unmute himself and come to the fore. It'd be nice to hear something from him. He's in New York now. He was in India for some time, and now he's back in New York.
Thank you, Maharaj. Om Agena Timirandasya Gana Gena Salakaya Chak Suran Militan Jaina Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. So it's an impossibility to really describe Srila Prabhupada in total. And I was very inspired hearing my God brothers and God sisters express their experiences and their vision for the future, staying in connection with Srila Prabhupada, realizing that he in every way has become our life. And as our life, we are bound together as a family because we have this common source of life. When we were with Srila Prabhupada in those wonderful days, it's very difficult to express what magic surrounded us. It was like a bubble of magic that we lived in. And every step, every action, every attempt to serve was somehow lifted up to another plane, and something that we had never experienced before. And in many ways, it's different in his personal absence now. There was, as Mahatma mentioned, a protection, a sense of protection, a sense of caring about every aspect of us, every one of us, however close or distant we may have appeared to be physically. Every one of us felt embraced And that was it is very conspicuous now to us by, to some degree, its absence in, the shelter that we're left with physically. It's almost like living in a pandemic, Asperger's in many ways compared to that time. It was really an experience. It was a remarkable time in history. So Srila Prabhupada was here a very short time. His story is so big that it will take millions of years to unpack. Within an epic, a Mahabharata, that really touches on every adventure, every heroic action, every setback, and every overcoming those setbacks that we see in the patterns of the Mahabharata, of these great epics. Srila Prabhupada's life is a repeat. In a sense, it is another Mahabharata. In the last Vyasa Puja offering that we were able to offer Srila Prabhupada in the Bhaktivedanta Manor in 1977, the majority of the event, Srila Prabhupada sitting on his Vyasa-san, listening to Tamal Krishna tell the story of the great adventure of Srila Prabhupada, all the little incidences that occurred. And Prabhupada was very, very excited to hear the story, and he would continuously interject corrections, additions. He was very actively participating, although he was very unwell. And it was very amazing to see, to hear that story again, because it was the story of him and his Lord doing something together. It was so clearly that that it was him and his Lord. As we have many times read his prayer on the Jaladuta, always the companionship of his Lord. And he was totally conscious, which created a miracle. So, I think if we look at the risks he took, the preparations, materially speaking, that he made, it was a reckless, literally doomed adventure to get on that boat, penniless, literally penniless, and head to a land that was so different than what he had come from. It was reckless. It was doomed. It was impossible. So how did it happen? Who made it happen? Who was in his corner? This is to those who have the willingness to open their eyes. It's very clear. Who is there in his corner? Who made it work? Who made it happen? And why? Why to put his hands directly into Prabhupada's mission? Because Prabhupada made himself helpless otherwise. He threw himself totally at the mercy of the Lord. And had the Lord not said, material circumstances would not have favored his success. So, there are many stories how the Lord is sometimes compelled by his devotees to step in, and Srila called on him at every minute. That's what made the magic, and that's what we all felt. We were all embraced by the Supreme Lord through his intimate representative of Prabhupada. We felt that embrace. And of course, we still feel that embrace. It's never gone there. We always know what we're supposed to do, where we're supposed to go. Not doing what we should do because he instructed us so clearly. He made it so obvious that unless we are determined to fool ourselves, we always know. I think it's an important thing. It was Yogeshwar Prabhu who was talking about the guilt that we feel, and that guilt is a wonderful thing because it's so much better to feel the gap, the pain of that gap between what we are and what we know we should be. There's a pain in that guilt. And it's so much better to feel that pain than to try to create some false narrative of how everything's okay, how down the standards is okay. No, Prabhupada never gave us that kind of liberality. He set the standard and he expected us to achieve it. And that was his kindness to push us to high standard, the standard that will ultimately take us out of this material world. Something that we have otherwise. So, in acknowledging Srila Prabhupada and his incredible story, we also remember so many of our God brothers who stood with him, were early adapters to his mission, to his battle. Some fell on the battlefield, some of them have left us now gloriously, but all of them came when he called. There's a story perhaps you all know of when once Krishna Maharaj went to Prabhupada and was expressing, utterly unqualified, he was expressing his surprise how he could have deserved this position. He said, I don't deserve this position. And Prabhupada agreed. He said, yes. When I called, you came. So there, that is the one qualification. So many great souls in India, the time Prabhupada was there, he called to them. They didn't. But by coming, they became heroes. And all qualifications came to them by that submission to the call of Lord Krishna's Senpati, lead general. So I think our duty to one another is to encourage each other and to remind each other. So I'm speaking these things, nothing new, nothing you don't all know. Each one of you could say it better than me. But still, I'm glad to be part of this family and this community. I think that we can say that Srila Prabhupada was the condensed milk, our Guru Varga, of our line, of our family of gurus. He wasn't just a spark of Bhaktisiddhanta. He was a manifestation of Bhaktisiddhanta. He was a manifestation of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of the six Goswamis, Mahaprabhu. He was full condensed milk. Therefore, he chosen to launch the attack on the West that they had all prepared for, that they had all intended. And all everything blessing, just as Narada Muni was there, laughing and surprised to see the magic of Mahaprabhu. being manifested through Srila Prabhupada. So it's a great privilege, and somehow I never really keep it properly in mind. Every step, every breath, I have his shelter, his protection over my. I remember once I was quite a renowned astrologer in India. Was out in the jungles of South India, in an old temple and an ashram, and he looked at my numbers. They do, and he said something. He said, "Wherever you go, there is a great saintly person who's always traveling with you." And it wasn't shocking to hear that, because I felt that, and I think every one of you feel that. And that's why we're here talking. That's why we're here to find him. So Srila Prabhupada, he just, and disappearance is really a disappearance from our eyes, but he cannot disappear from our heart. We have embraced him in our heart, and our heart with hope, even with a little wisdom. And nothing else did that. Nothing else in life. We've looked collectively. I've certainly looked individually for all those joy, wisdom in every other nook and cranny. Not a drop. I couldn't drop. But with Srila Prabhupada, it was an ocean. I still can't quite comprehend. And it keeps washing upon me. So we are now roughly similar ages, and this is roughly the time. In my case, it's precisely the time that Srila Prabhupada launched his mission to the West. I'm now 69. And I think this is the best time for those of us who feel that guilt, who feel we've done enough. This is the best time. Some of us hopefully still have health to do something. And after being knocked around as much as we certainly should have enough wisdom to know that we should do something. And with the inspiration of Prabhupada starting at this age, there's no excuse. We must do something. I know for sure that someday soon I will be gone from this body, and I will be sitting in a room with Srila Prabhupada. And I don't want to be that devotee that skulks in the back of the room hoping he doesn't notice me. I somehow must be there with something. At least let there be dirt and blood in my fingernails to show that I tried. I've spoken big words in the past and failed. So I hope all of you will hold my ambitions and embarrass me when I fail and push me on. And I hope I can similarly encourage you all. It was wonderful when we were in our 20s, but we were just little guppies, little minnows. We were just learning. Now is the time. Now is our time, just as it was Prabhupada's time. And in 10 years, we can change the world with his blessings, because that's what he wanted. And because he wanted it, we can be confident that the Lord wants it. Into that mission with full enthusiasm and putting our hope only, we will achieve something. And we will have something to offer him when we sit in that darshan that will come when we leave this body. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. We have a couple of speakers who have been recorded previously, and if Krishna is willing, maybe this will work. So if all your prayers are with me, we will hear from Jayapataka Swami here. So let's see if this actually works.
Makakaroti Vajalam, Angulang Ayate Garim, Yatila, Samahan Mande, Sri Gurum Dinatadinam, Paramananda Madhavam, Sri Chaitanya Isram, Hari Om Tat Sat. In the Caitanya Jayadvaita, there's a description of Madhavendra Puri, and Lord Chaitanya asked Lord Nityananda, is there anyone as fortunate as Madhavendra Puri? We see that His Divine Grace, Avaichan Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, he also did a similar impossible feat. Well, Madhavendra Puri with no money, he went all the way, thousands of miles, to Jagannath Puri to get sandalwood pulp and camphor. Prabhupada went across the globe by freighter, ship, and reached America to start the Krishna consciousness movement, which now is a worldwide movement. Prabhupada started 108 temples himself, and then after that, now we have almost 600 to 800 temples, thousands of bhakti rickshaws, and thousands of non-hots. So this was all started by Lord Krishna's mercy, by His Divine Grace, Avaichan Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So we're all incredibly permanently indebted to His Divine Grace for the wonderful service He has done. He has shown how one can use every thought, word, and deed in the service of Lord Krishna. Sometimes He called me to his room at 1 or 2 in the morning to say something. I was always on call 24 hours a day. Whenever he would call me. But I saw how he was translating the Srimad Bhagavatam from Sanskrit to English, using his dictaphone and using his abilities. So, like this, he worked very hard to translate these books. And so we should all read the books. Very important. Parikit Maharaj, he sacrificed his life so that the Srimad Bhagavatam is spoken. Prabhupada, he translated Bhagavatam from Sanskrit to English, so we could have this wealth of spiritual knowledge. Now we should not make any excuse. We should read Prabhupada's books and implement his policies. Still, Prabhupada was very practical. he would put to practice whatever he taught. I remember in Montreal, one time he was saying how he should ask the healthy person while he does his shopping. At that time, a taxi drove up. The taxi driver got out. He was quite healthy. Prabhupada said, ask him, what does he do? Shopping. So he said, he did his shopping at A&W. Hey, anyway, some supermarket. Like that, Prabhupada was very spontaneous. He told us that we should buy our grain, our vegetables from local farmers and get it at a wholesale price. Just then a farmer was walking with a basket on his head. And so then Prabhupada started to bargain with him. How much for your basket? And he said, no, I'm going to Navadip and sell my vessel there. Prabhupada said, why do you spend the whole day sitting there? We'll buy everything. You must have some work to do at your house. So they bargained, and he sold the whole basket to Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada told us to pray him, take a basket of vegetables like this. When he says something, he would do it immediately. It was not that he was ready to show what he taught, he could do it. So he was telling us clearly what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And he was willing to back it up with practical examples if needed. So we were very fortunate in Mayapur that he came here twice a year, every year. He come in the fall, sometime before or after the Damodar month, and he come at the Gaur time. So we had this association twice a year, and he would tell us how to arrange things, how to manage things. It was very practical. One time water was dripping. He asked, who is responsible for the water dripping? Everybody pointed at me. He said, Jayadvaita swami. No, he's in charge of everything. He will see that everybody does his first. But who is the actual person who's in charge of water? So like that, Prabhupada was teaching how to manage the temple president or the co-director or whatever. He should not be in charge of anything. He should see that everyone else does their service. Like that, we had to assign each activity to someone. I had to see that they were doing their service. So Prabhupada like this, he was very practical. Once he was walking on the road, and so one man bowed down. Prabhupada said, what do you do? He said, I'm a weaver. I do handloom. Prabhupada said, very good. Come and stay in our ashram. He said, first class is Brahmin, second class is Kshatriya, third class is Vaishya, fourth class is Sudra. He's working. I mean, we don't mind. He's working, that's good. We don't want lazy and crazy. We don't want this class. Fourth class, all right. So, like this. Prabhupada was very efficient, very effective. And then he would encourage all the ladies, all the children, that they should do their service. And he was encouraging them, giving cookies to the kids, appreciating the ladies. He was very kind to everyone. When he heard that some people were criticizing, he told us we should not take it seriously, that his spiritual master was always by his side at every moment. He was very much in contact with his guru. And he said it so emphatically that we could actually visualize Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur by his side. How he came to USA, how he traveled the world, how he established Krishna consciousness. We're very much grateful. We thank His Holiness Chandrasekhara Swami for organizing this function. For Srila Prabhupada, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
All right. So we've heard from Jayapataka Swami. Now Ravindra Sarup is here. If we can hear from Ravindra.
Vanchakalpatrubhyascha kripasindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I had the chance to do some research into the history of the idea of founder acharya and where it came from, and it turned out there's quite a history there. And when Prabhupada took that title, we can see in the record of things in the written record that it was actually being prepared for Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and that the term founder acharya was used for the four sampradaya acharyas. And so when Prabhupada used that title, it was quite astonishing when you see the where it came from. The spreading of Krishna consciousness to the West was actually three very huge devotees, because Lord Chaitanya's movement was, for most people, a kind of local Bengali movement in India and in Puri somewhat. But it's Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was a civil servant in the British government. And so he had connections outside of India, relationships, and a vision of a theater of operation that was much bigger than just India. He was educated in English language, part of what was called the Bhadralok of Calcutta, who English educated and very urbane, worldly kind of people. And so he saw himself in a bigger context at that time, the British Empire. He was their civil servant there. And he is the one who really discovered Lord Chaitanya's movement, found who was practicing it purely in very renounced, secluded Babajis, got a hold of Chaitanya Charitamrita and had this vision of turning it into a world religion. And he spoke and wrote in English on occasion. His son picked it up, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, picked up where he left off, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur's followers were mostly educated people in Calcutta. He didn't have an ashram. This was done by Bhaktisiddhanta. He had brahmacharis, and he made mats, temples, Gaudiya mats, deities and brahmacharis. And he took the English, the journal of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the 19th century. A major way that new ideas were developed and expounded was through writing periodicals. It was a big thing in Europe and so on. They were writing journals, people writing articles for journals and sitting in tea shops in London and exchanging them with each other. And he was also part of that culture. And so he started Sajjanatoshini. And then his son took it and turned it into an English language journal, The Harmonist. And he had this idea of, he made mats, he had monks, he had people who were exclusively educated and free to go and travel and preach and do things like that. And he actually launched a foray into England with sending Ban Maharaj to London. And they started there in London with preachers. We saw in the Harmonist that they also had people, by the way, in Germany, and there in the Harmonist it said that in Berlin we are observing Vyasa Puja for Srila Prabhupada, meaning Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And here Dr. Goebbels has kindly agreed to inaugurate the affair. These are the kind of things that were going on. Somehow or other, Bhaktisiddhanta got quite disgusted with Maharaj and recalled him. And they were going to launch things again. But it had gotten that far. And they also had a very big book called Sri Krishna Caitanya, which was quite quite well done. I got an original copy of it from a lending library, and it was impeccably edited, very highly written. This was an English language book that was supposed to be the first of 3 volumes to take to the West. And then things seemed to stop for a while. Bhaktisiddhanta passed away, break for World War II, these kind of things going on. And we see that our Srila Prabhupada took up where he left off. That the template for what he did was already set by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. This was, and he took it the next step forward, and therefore he spent time writing in English and publishing books. I have original copies of his first 3 volumes of the first canto of the Bhagavatam that he himself not only wrote out, but got printed and edited and the whole thing like that. And of course, we know he finally went to the West with all this behind him. So where do we go from here? That's you see the effort of 3 generations of great devotees to turn what was an obscure Bengali religion into a worldwide spiritual movement was quite needed to be done. and quite an achievement. And so here we are thinking now, what do we do here, and how do we go on further? Because Prabhupada wanted it. He said once, I am one person, just see what I have done. And now we are, I forget the number, it was a pretty small number. Now we are 50 or 100, I forgot what it was. Now each one of you become just like me and see what can be done. And he said that you become just like me. Like it's not mission impossible to do. And what does it mean to become just like Prabhupada? And what it really means is to become the servant. The way up is the way down. If you want to become great, you have to become small. And if you think you're becoming big, you're probably becoming little in another way, There's one thing, when we look at Prabhupada's instructions, there's one thing Prabhupada said in a Bhagavatam class in Los Angeles in 1972. And he says, I'm just going to read from here. He says in this class, this is it's recorded and printed in the Lord Chaitanya is teaching how to surrender to Krishna. There's no difference between Lord Chaitanya's teaching and Krishna's teaching, the same thing. In one form, Krishna is saying that you surrender to me, and Lord Chaitanya says that you surrender to Krishna. The fact is the same. So we are following Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we are canvassing, please surrender to Krishna. So our business is not very difficult. If we follow ourselves, if we surrender to Krishna fully and teach others also the same thing, not that something adulteration, no, exactly what Krishna says, then you become spiritual master, guru. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, and he quotes here, Amar Ajnaya Guru Hana Tare Edesh, Jare Deka Tare Kari Krishna Upadesh. Prabhupada says, under my order, you become spiritual master and deliver the people of your country. And what is that order? That Jare Deka Tare Kari Krishna Upadesh. Whomever you meet, you simply speak what Krishna has said or what is spoken about Krishna. That is Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So every one of you follow the instruction as you have received. Chant 16 rounds regularly without fail and follow the regulative principles and hear about Krishna and preach about Krishna. Every one of you become spiritual master. Simple thing, no education required, because we are hearing about Krishna, so we can speak the same thing. What is the difficulty? If I hear from my spiritual master, or from any learned man, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so if I say by hearing that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I haven't got to search out whether Krishna is the Personality of Godhead or not. But if I accept authority, then I speak the real truth. This is our Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, sometimes when people say in India, Swamiji, you have done wonderful. And yes, I do not know. I'm not a magician. But so far as I am confident that I did not adulterate the words of Krishna, that's all. That's my credit. I did not like to take the position of Krishna. I remained the servant of Krishna, and I spoke what Krishna said. That's all. This is my secret. So everyone can do that. There is nothing magic. The magic will act as soon as you become a pure devotee of Krishna. The magic will be done by Krishna, not by me or you. He will do it. Just like a small child, nobody can hurt him. The father will take care. He doesn't know, the child. He's simply depending on the father. My father, mother, that's all. Krishna says that you surrender to me, I give you protection. He's not a liar. He's not inefficient. He's strong. He's sufficiently opulent. He can do that. So believe in Krishna's word, surrender unto him, and don't spoil the human form of life. Death is sure. Before death, we must prepare to go back home, back to Godhead. Thank you. That was the ending of his wonderful lecture there. I have not done anything wonderful, just simple thing. This is Prabhupada's, to me, a very inspiring instruction. He says, this is my secret. This is my secret. And he says it very simply. And if any time our movement seems to have gone off the rails or gone here or gone there, it's because these simple instructions were not being followed. And this particular lecture in particular, it's done so simply and so humbly, and yet it's so powerful that I go back to it again and again to make sure I remember it correctly. and this is his. He tells us his secret. He tells us what he did, because you can see how successful he was. This is how it's done, and he never said to anybody, "You can't qualify to do this." So our dedication to Srila Prabhupada is actually shown by how much we take to heart his instructions and follow them. We will become empowered. And when he says the four regulative principles, we should understand that these are also principles of knowledge. They're not just moral principles. But actually, these four regulative principles are cognitive. You want to see Krishna, you want to get close to Krishna, you want to, Krishna is close to you. I mean, he shares the same body with you. He's right there. You want to see him? The simple thing, follow these four regulative principles. And then you're connected not only with the Lord who's in your heart, but the one who's running this and many other universes. It's quite a bit of access we've been granted. And we should not waste any time and take advantage of it. And every time we do, we should in our hearts thank Srila Prabhupada for what he has done and the difficulty he has gone through to do this. And Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, so many great people have dedicated their lives so that we can become benefited. And if we really sincerely want to take advantage of it, it's all there for us. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Let me see. For some reason, it's not switching over to my image. Let's see what's happening here. Okay, so the next person that I want to invite to speak is Badarayana, how I see here. So he's, if he's available, can he?
Yep. Can you hear me, Maharaj?
Thank you very much, Badarayana, for joining us today.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just first want to thank Ravindra Prabhu for reading that mind-blowing, beautiful lecture. I'm wondering if he could put the exact date and place of that lecture so I could access it. It's so profoundly beautiful. And it's like Prabhupada said, it's like he said, it's the secret, but then he also said, it's like that's where the magic is. The magic is Krishna is doing it through that sincere following, unadulterated, not changing, but following this simple formula. And just so enlivening to hear that. So thank you. Yeah, if you could put that in the chat, that would be really wonderful. I'm also Om Gyana Timrandasya Ganangana Slakaya Chakshur Unmilatam Gena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I'm also reminded in that regard of our dear friend, God brother, Srila Bhakti Charu Swami. So unfortunate, is leaving us untimely. Last time, not the last time, but one of the last times I saw him, he was in New Orleans, and we were having a discussion about Siddha Pranali, the esoteric principle, and his realization was so, it's kind of in the same mood of Srila Prabhupada's lecture that you read, Ravindra. It's the KISS principle, keep it simple, sadhu. And his realization that Lord Chaitanya really gave us the Siddha Pranali mantra, Trinata Pisa Nichina, Tarora Pisa Hisnuna, Manida Manidena Kirtaniya Sadahari, that humble mood of straw between the teeth, and not expecting honor, ready to offer honor to all others. And in this mood, one can chant the holy name and get that mercy that we so earnestly desire, so we can be empowered to represent Srila Prabhupada and preach this message. So I'm just thinking of Bhakti Charu Maharaj today and his incredible love for Srila Prabhupada, his dedication, and all the service that he's done. And pray that he blesses us to imbibe that principle that he described to me that day. So I wrote an offering last night, just thinking about the times we live in. So I'll read that. The golden age of Kali is predicted. We are at the infancy, or in the infancy stages. And yet we see so much increase of sinful activity and atheistic philosophy contaminating the environment. We are experiencing the predominance of fear propaganda being spewed into the ether. There are deep and pervasive levels of corruption and deception. Much of the population is waking up to this. And then there are the ever-present threats of atheistic, communist-oriented philosophy, often disguised as something benign, along with materialistic, godless science, which have both insidiously infiltrated our educational systems and think tanks in America. We, Srila Prabhupada, as your Diksha and Shiksha disciples, must be vigilant in this regard, lest sentimental conceptions weaken the foundation of our faith in your bold preaching vision and mission, Srila Prabhupada. While the message of the sweetness of Radha and Krishna's love and the magnanimity of Nitai Gauranga Patita Pavana is the esoteric essence and ultimate goal of our Gaudiya tradition, there are formidable forces which must be overcome in order for that pure love to become manifest in the world. You, Srila Prabhupada, made this very clear. You didn't mince words in this regard. So I'll now read from some room conversations, Srila Prabhupada, and also conversations that Prabhupada had with Rameshwar from the Memory Series. This first one is April 4th, 1975 in Mayapur. Prabhupada, but they are uncompromising, the communists. They are staunch enemy of the capitalists. Their whole philosophy is against God and against capitalism. So if America becomes Krishna conscious and fights, they have God's strength plus God's blessing. They'll come out victorious. Fight is going on. We cannot stop. But if the American people take to Krishna consciousness and fight with the communists, they'll come out victorious. Then the menace of communistic movement will stop. And we want that. We want these demonic communists should be finished. Next conversation, morning walk, December 18th, 1973. Yes, the main point is that in God we trust on this slogan. So the same point is that what do you mean by God and what do you mean by trust? That you do not know. So you have to explain what is God and what is trust thoroughly from our books. And our propaganda is like that, to teach actually what is God and what is trust. And you important men of the state, you come forward, try to understand, to open schools, colleges, make it perfectly known what is God, and make America strong. As the Communist Party, they are preaching godlessness. Now America should preach, no, in God we trust. Now there should be a fight, not on the political point of view, but actually it includes everything. A class of men godless and a class of men godless, God conscious, who knows God. There should be a fight. So Prabhupada, his spirit is very strong. This is a conversation with Rameshwar. I believe Rameshwar is on the call. So the conversation was about World War III. I won't read the first part of Rameshwar's, but he goes on to say this is in discussion of the war that Prabhupada predicted that World War III would start between India and Pakistan. So Rameshwar relates, this had been a topic of great concern all over ISKCON for many years with much kata. I asked Srila Prabhupada if there was any chance of the war being averted. At first he said no. He said, communism is so evil, we must force this war to happen. Communism has to end. In fact, Srila Prabhupada said, just as Krishna appears to protect the devotees and annihilate the demons, so this Hare Krishna movement has arisen to annihilate the two great demons of our age, godless communism and godless science. So there must be a war to end it. Then Prabhupada sat back and thought for a moment. Then he said, but there is possibility that this war may be averted. It depends on your book distribution. He continued to say, your book distribution is creating a spiritual environment throughout the whole world, and that will awaken spiritual sentiments in everyone's heart. And as that awakens, as you continue this book distribution, that spiritual sentiment may bring down communism from within. Then Srila Prabhupada said, yes, and future historians will note how communism failed because of your book distribution. They will note how a revolution, a spiritual revolution throughout human society took place. And one more conversation with Rameshwar. And after communism, this is Prabhupada speaking, and after communism is defeated, we must attack and defeat godless science. The demons of godless science, Darwin, we must attack, we must defeat. We were traveling, this is Rameshwar speaking now, we were traveling by train and Srila Prabhupada looked out the window and said, there is so much illiteracy in India right now, and that is Krishna's blessing. I said, why? And Srila Prabhupada said, so they don't have to hear the nonsense atheistic philosophies of Darwin. Srila Prabhupada's last instruction to me as a BBT trustee was to publish books that defeat godless science and sell them to the temples at cost. They were going to be exempt from the markup that every other book had. He carved out an exception for the science books, and he ordered me to take money from the BBT as a budget for the science preaching, $10,000 to $20,000 a month, whatever they needed. That's how much Srila Prabhupada was determined that through the BBT we are going to defeat godless science. So now I continue on here. Srila Prabhupada, you are the Senapati Bhakta that Sriman Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted, the great general of bhakti. As the general, you are leading the troops of the Krishna consciousness movement and the Sankirtan army into many battles, epic battles, between the devotees and the demons, between good and evil. There is a war, and we are in a fight. Make no mistake about it. We must choose our moves, decisions, and alliances carefully, based not on sentiment, but on an impartial study of your words, your mood, and your directives, such as those quoted above. And we must take up this fight for the principles of righteousness, godliness, and morality. Otherwise, society is doomed. We must be the devotees, the tip of the spear. That is how you trained us, a transcendental revolutionary army. And we were revolutionaries back in the day. And we must continue in that same spirit. There are forces which seek to divide us, discourage us, and weaken us. We must be vigilant and attentive to the tenor of your teachings and take heed of your instructions. Even they may seem to rock our world or burst our bubble. The Sankirtan mission is one that is fundamentally counteropposed to atheistic communistic ideology and material scientific dogma. But you were adamant, Srila Prabhupada. You said that this Hare Krishna movement has arisen to annihilate the two great demons of our age, godless communism and godless science. So there must be a war to end it. So let's roll up our sleeves, put on our boots, and grab our weapons in the form of your books. Krishna Prasadam, innovative preaching, loving kindness, compassion, a mature spirit of appreciation and cooperation, and armed with knowledge, O Arjuna, O stalwart devotees of Srila Prabhupada, O sincere, dedicated followers of this glorious Krishna consciousness movement, let us stand together and fight. I am, and we are all eternally in your debt, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you very much, Butterina. That was very interesting. There's so much food for thought today. There's another devotee who couldn't be with us because of time constraints. It was difficult for him. He already had another event planned. So I'm going to play Devamrta Swami's video. Hold on, we'll see if we get this one to work.
Om Gana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Speaking on Srila Prabhupada's Disappearance Day is always a bittersweet experience. We think deeply about our separation from him on the physical. Is at the BBT in Los Angeles as the production manager and final copy editor for Prabhupada's books. And I never at all considered that Srila Prabhupada would depart until 3 days before his departure. I received on my desk the manuscript sent from India, the manuscript of the 13th chapter of the 10th canto, the Brahma Vimohana Leela. And I remember reading that manuscript and tears pouring from my eyes, because somehow or other, as I was reading it, I had the distinct insight that this would be the last chapter of the Bhaktivedanta purports. And sure enough, 3 days later, the news was announced at Mangalarti in Los Angeles. I recall the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Uddhava is commiserating with Vidura. Uddhava says something very dramatic, very striking. Krishna Jumani Nimloche. Gareshu Ajagarena Ha. Sri Uddhava says, my dear Vidura, the sun, S-U-N, the sun of the world, the Krishna sun has set. And everything around us has been swallowed up by the snake of time. Therefore, what can we say about our welfare? How can we be happy? Yes, this is the immediate reaction that we experience. The pain of separation. Uddhava wanted Vidura to understand that I fully feel what you're feeling. How can we be happy? How can anyone have any proper welfare in such darkness? The whole world is plunged into such darkness. And Srila Prabhupada points out in the purport how in the darkness, thieves thrive, ghosts become active, all kinds of unwanted elements proliferate. The beauty of the lotus flower closes. So yes, this is one side. So poignantly presented by Sri Uddhava. But then, just like the sun, when it disappears at night, it's not finished. Similarly, our relationship with Srila Prabhupada was not finished and is not finished. The sun, S-U-N, of the Vani rose in the sky. Still, we'd love to have Srila Prabhupada's Vapu, his physical association. He himself, when speaking about Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur on the Disappearance Day celebration of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada said that certainly it would be so wonderful if he were physically present now. But then he asserted, but he's always with me. And this is what any disciple striving to be genuine wants to achieve: the constant presence of Srila Prabhupada. So on the one hand, the sun of the world has set. Krishna leaves the ordinary vision of this world, and so does his devotee. Krishna goes from universe to universe, presenting his transcendental leelas, and his empowered devotees go from place to place, planet to planet, universe to universe, spreading the glories of Krishna. Just as Srila Prabhupada explained about his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He said, my Guru Maharaj preached in this world, on this planet, and then he went somewhere else to continue the same activity. So in that way, the sun is always present, even though apparently it's disappeared from our sight. Just like the sun planet and its sunlight are never extinguished. They just disappear from our ordinary vision. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada is always with his sincere followers. I remember, one last point. I remember having the service while at the BBT in Los Angeles of caring for all of Srila Prabhupada's correspondence, letters from him as well as the letters to him. So I got to see both sides. And I saw quite a few letters containing questions asked by devotees over a 10-year span of time. Quite a few questions in which devotees asked, if we break our vows and desist from our bhakti practices, will you, Srila Prabhupada, come in a future birth of ours and reclaim us? So the first answer I saw in the late 60s was, yes. So you should maintain your vows so that I won't have to come back to get you. Then later, in the 70s, the answer changed a bit. In fact, one response by Srila Prabhupada said, when asked, will you come back to rescue fallen disciples because the relationship between the disciple and guru is eternal? And Prabhupada responded, I'm still thinking about that. In other words, we shouldn't be so carefree and casual. We should take our relationship very seriously. We should make the preservation of that relationship our top priority. So this is sweet, that somehow or other, despite the laws of time and space, the sincere followers of Srila Prabhupada can always look forward to increased association with him. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
So we heard a little bit from Devamrta Swami. And before we go to our next Zoom attendee here, I wanted to do a very short presentation here by Kadamba Kananaswamy, who was also one of our important well-wishers here at in New York. So we'll set this one to go.
Jai Krishna Pastai Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami, Dinamine Namaste Saraswati Deva Gauravani Pacharine, Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Pasya Desatayane. As Prabhupada boarded the Jayadvaita on the way to New York, his destination was Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Pastai Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami, Dinamine Namaste Saraswati Deva Gauravani Pacharine, Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Pasya Desatayane. As Prabhupada boarded the Jayadvaita on the way to New York, his destination was not New York. His destination was the entire world, because Prabhupada all along saw New York as the gateway to reaching the world. It was there where he started in a small storefront with a handful of followers, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And from there, Krishna Consciousness did spread to all the major parts of the world, with followers, temples, and books translated and distributed, and so many other achievements. Srila Prabhupada understood the importance of New York City in leading the world, and that leadership has not yet come to an end. Rather, New York is meant to continue to inspire the world in Krishna consciousness. And so this will be our service to Srila Prabhupada to somehow or other make that a reality. And if we can do so, then I'm sure that His divine grace will shower us with so many blessings. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. I think we'll do our last recorded message here. And this one is recorded from one of our local devotees here, Adi Purush, who spent many years at New Vrindavan, and now he's been running a food distribution program here in New York City for quite a long time, for many years, where he does an outreach to distribute food at Tompkins Square Park. So he has a very interesting take on things, and we'll roll this one here.
We're here to glorify Srila Prabhupada, to appreciate Srila Prabhupada. When you close the computer at the end of this session, or when you close your eyes, when you're ready to take rest this evening, if you find yourself saying, how wonderful is Krishna, how wonderful is Srila Prabhupada, yes, Prabhupada, I want to serve you, right? If that's what you, Vaisheshika Prabhu always says, when you leave class, you probably might take away one thing. We hope you'll take away just that. And Srila Prabhupada's grace, Srila Prabhupada's instruction, Srila Prabhupada's love and his guidance is coming to us constantly and right now at this moment. So I have nothing to say. I have no idea what to say. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. But I'm going to pray to Krishna and Srila Prabhupada that Krishna will help to speak through me. We'll share one small story, short story. And interestingly enough, very often when Srila Prabhupada speaks, what he has to say even to one person, if you hear it, we understand actually this is a principle that's meant for everyone. So the scene for this story is New Vrindavan, 1974. Srila Prabhupada was visiting for a few weeks. And, you know, New Vrindavan is in an undeveloped area in the forest, in the mountains, and half an hour from the nearest highway, half an hour drive. And at that time, the basic cluster of buildings where the devotees lived and Radharani and Chandra were worshipped was a place called Bahulaban. And if you drive on this dirt road past Bahulaban, deeper into the forest, up onto the ridge, along the ridge, almost 2 miles, you come to the place where Srila Prabhupada's palace is today. And then further from that is the place where this took place. And that time was nothing but woods, jungle, as Prabhupada would say, jungle, you know. And even though we were in a very remote location, and even though we had some neighbors who were very respectful and loving and friendly, there were also some people living in that area we call redneck, hillbilly, rowdy type people who, for want of something better to do, would be taking intoxication, getting drunk, and driving in small groups, or sometimes 2 trucks at a time in the back of their pickup trucks with guns, shooting in the, fortunately they didn't shoot at us, but they would shoot in the air in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, every once in a while. It didn't happen every day, but it was something that we were concerned about. And so the place where Srila Prabhupada was saying was 2 miles deeper into the forest along this dirt road from where all the other devotees were staying. So my service at that time was to stand in front of Srila Prabhupada's house at night from about 8 o'clock at night till about 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was supposed to be Prabhupada's bodyguard. And they gave me a double-barrel shotgun and a .38 pistol. And I was standing there trying to protect Srila Prabhupada, which is ridiculous because Srila Prabhupada is protecting us. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, I was just a rank and file devotee. I wasn't one of these people who was intimately connected with Srila Prabhupada like the GBC members, the sannyasis, the temple presidents. I was just in the early stages of being in the Hare Krishna movement. So I didn't really have much personal interaction with Srila Prabhupada directly. But at 1 o'clock in the morning, the light would go on. I'm in front of the house. The light would go on in Prabhupada's bedroom. And gradually I would hear Srila Prabhupada speaking into his dictaphone, translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I'm outside in this summer night, very, 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 very quiet, deep in the jungle. And it started to rain. So I went down underneath the house. There was a driveway going down and a garage under the house. I opened the garage door and I was doing my guard service from inside, the protection of the garage. And I didn't know that Srila Prabhupada could come down through the house down to the garage. So I'm standing there and all of a sudden, poof, Prabhupada's standing right next to me. I offered obeisances and I just basically choked out, Prabhupada, how can I serve you? How can I serve you? And Prabhupada was like a mountain. He looked at me and he did that thing he does with his lips. You can go where I won't go. Now, Srila Prabhupada had just come from Tokyo to San Francisco, to Los Angeles, to Dallas, to New Orleans, to Chicago. He went to New York and he came to Boston and coming to Pittsburgh and visiting New Vrindavan, and then he was going back to New York, and then he was going to London and Europe and India. He was traveling all over the world. This is 1974. Meanwhile, I had just hitchhiked to New Vrindavan when I moved in there. Didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. I had no money. I didn't even have 2 shoes that matched. I had lost my ID. I had no means or no desire to go anywhere. But Prabhupada was traveling all over the world. And when I said, how can I serve you? He said, you can go where I won't go. So I said, Prabhupada, where won't you go? He said, to the future. To the future? What does he want me to build a time machine? What does he want me to go to the future? You know, the Guru tells you where to go. He tells me to go to the future. And then he said, and how you treat the people there can show them that Krishna loves them. And so I just closed my eyes like this. I couldn't exactly process what he told me to do. And when I opened my eyes, Prabhupada was gone. He just laid that on me and split. Now, this is an instruction for all of us. If you think about it, Prabhupada is asking us to go. Now, here we are 50 years later, and I'm having service taking care of feeding the homeless people in the street, Krishna's distributing Krishna's prasadam, Krishna's mercy. So, yeah, kind of interesting that it was prophetic, but it's an instruction for all of us that we can go where Prabhupada won't go on his behalf, on his request, and show the people there how Krishna loves them. We talk about love of God, but we also have to remember that Krishna loves you. And for people to hear that is very consoling and important to understand. And it inspires us to serve Krishna. Okay, that's all we have to say. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Hare Krishna.
So thank you, Adi Purush. This is a chance now for us to hear from Rameshwar, who is with us today. And he spent a lot of time in very, very close proximity to Srila Prabhupada. And he always has very wonderful realizations. So I'm asking Rameshwar to come to the fore.
Maharaj, I don't know if you noticed that Srimati Malati Devi joined the call.
She
And
did.
and I think we lost Jyotia Mai, but please, she is in every respect my superior. Please let her speak first.
Well, as your superior, I'm requesting you to please speak. Thank you very much.
That's Malati. I have to obey her. Okay, Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Varaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Om Gyanati Vrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshusmiritanjena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you for the opportunity to say some glorious things about Prabhupada. From the perspective of a puny brain, just trying to relate what Prabhupada did and myself in this body, sometimes I just become awestruck and overwhelmed just in the simplest analysis that my mind goes through. I think of Prabhupada at the age of 69 or 70. So many of my god brothers and god sisters have reached that age. And I'm just trying to imagine leaving everything, leaving your home, not having any possessions practically, not having practically any money, not practically having any clothes, and traveling to a place you've never been to before. It's so famous in the movie that Yadavar gave us, where we hear his first host saying, my God, he didn't even know what snow was. He had never seen snow before. And just thinking of Prabhupada walking around, not properly clothed, no money, a stranger in a strange land, as Yogeshwar always tells us, and completely transcending the miseries of that type of situation that would be so miserable for me and some of us. I can't imagine it. And then to have come here with a mission and to be out one day and come back home to his small one-room apartment and to find that it was broken into, manuscripts stolen, typewriters stolen. What made Prabhupada stay? Of course, if he hadn't stayed, none of us would be here. We'd all be overwhelmed by our sinful actions and the karmic reactions, and he stayed. There's a love that Prabhupada had that in our wildest dreams, we can't imagine a love like that. You know, in the heart of every person, at some point in our lives, we've all dreamed of pure love. We could only experience pure love. But we didn't even know what that means. We didn't even know how to define love. Prabhupada stayed when no one else would have. He came when no one else would have. So sometimes I try with my limited brain, limited intelligence, to understand what does it mean? What kind of love does Prabhupada have for us? And the way my mind works, the way my intelligence works is I've always thought of the Lord in our hearts, Lord Paramatma. And I've always tried to understand love by the inconceivable fact that as every soul goes through abominable conditions of life, God, in his form as Paramatma, stays with that soul. That soul is engaging that body in horrible things, eating horrible things, acting in horrible ways. And not even for a second does God leave. Does the Lord Paramatma leave us? He stays with us. And how many souls are there? He has expanded himself to be with every single soul because he loves every soul. But you can't calculate the number of souls. Every blade of grass has a soul. Every shrub and tree, an insect has a soul in it. This is one tiny planet out of millions of planets. They all have inhabited bodies, so souls in bodies. How much love does God have for the souls? And this is just one universe. And there are countless universes, and God is with every soul in every one of them. And that's just his Vishnu Tattva feature. Srila Prabhupada is not an ordinary acharya or spiritual master. My realization from the very first time I looked at his books and heard him chant on the Govinda on his album, my realization was that this is a person who's seen God in person. He comes from where God lives, and he has come down as an ambassador to represent God. He is the perfect spiritual master because of that, because he perfectly can represent God because he knows God. I was always overwhelmed in total awe. From the very first moment I heard about Prabhupada, I just sensed this is who he is. And so when I think of how God loves every soul, and that's just his Vishnu feature, And beyond that, there's his Narayan feature and all the infinite Vaikuntha worlds that are filled with the majority of souls. And beyond all of that, to love, to know God even beyond that, there's Lord Ram and his world. And beyond all of that, there's Krishna. And Prabhupada came from that realm to perfectly embody and represent God's love for every soul as God's ambassador. I don't have another explanation to explain why devotees from every country in the world who had any contact with Prabhupada and share their memories with Siddhanta Prabhu, and every one of them has a story that's so personal. They felt Prabhupada in such a personal way. This is not human. This is so beyond anything human, that so many diverse people, diverse attributes and personalities and tendencies, every one of them felt that Prabhupada loved them very personally. He is like the ambassador of love, of pure love. Every one of us on this call, whoever had any contact with Prabhupada, felt that he loved us. And we felt it was a miracle, that it was so undeserved that he took us in, let us be with him. And no matter what we were, he loved us. And when he left this world from our vision, that person who loved us in a way that no one else could have loved us, that no one else ever loved us like that before, other than Krishna himself, that person left the world. And we were left with that experience of being loved purely, unconditionally. And now he's gone. And we're trying to deal with that. 50, how many years later? We're all grappling with the fact that that person who encouraged us, who took us in and gave us abilities that we could never have had on our own, gave us orders that contained powers to carry them out, and enabled all of us to do things that we never could have done on our own. That person is gone, in a sense. Of course, he's never gone, but he disappeared. This is his disappearance day. And we all miss him. Every one of us has a personal experience of how Prabhupada dealt with us, sometimes lovingly, sometimes just giving us a cookie, sometimes beating us with a stick. And we miss that so much. And we pray that we don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. That one day we could be with him again. The person who loved us so purely, we miss so much. There were times where Prabhupada would correct me in a wonderful, chastising way. I have so many stories about that, but I'm just going to share one. We were in his quarters in New York, and a reporter was interviewing Prabhupada. And as their conversation was going back and forth, she glimpsed that Prabhupada was saying that God speaks to him. And he speaks back to God. And she was completely incredulous that anybody would dare to claim that. And she said, "Are you actually saying that you speak to God? God speaks to you? You hear?" So there was a pause in the room. It seemed insulting, and with such skepticism, this reporter was talking to Prabhupada, that I blurted out, which was a tendency I had sometimes with Prabhupada. I would just sometimes blurt things out. Like the day on the morning walk where I blurted out, Prabhupada, that's impossible. I blurt things out. So, hello? I'm back. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, you're still
I'll
here.
just finish this story. So I blurted out, when Prabhupada says he speaks to God, God speaks to him, what he means is, and I quoted a verse from Bhagavad Gita about how Krishna gives the intelligence by which you can come to him. And so I blurted that verse out. And Prabhupada looked at me like, you are the biggest idiot, you stupid idiot. But he said, no, that's not what I mean. I mean, yes, Krishna speaks to me and I hear him. And it was, but the way Prabhupada said it with such absolute, like a revelation to us in the room, that he can speak to God. He can see God. Here he is in this room, but actually his consciousness, he can see God and hear God speaking to him, and they have conversations. And it's real. It's literal. And the reporter understood after Prabhupada corrected me so wonderfully that that's what Prabhupada was saying. And she somehow sensed the magnitude of this, that this personality is actually, this could be true. Well, we knew it was true. We all knew it was true. We were always we had such awe for Prabhupada of who he was because of that. And we miss him, as I was saying. Prabhupada so many times chastised me, and it was the most wonderful experience to have someone who could lovingly correct you and chastise you and smash you when you needed to be smashed. So there's many things about Prabhupada that I miss, and that I really miss. Prabhupada smashing me, correcting me. So I pray that every one of my God brothers and God sisters returns back to Prabhupada's lotus feet. I pray you all return. And maybe if you do, he'll say a kind word, and maybe one day he'll let me come back to him. Hare Krishna. Thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada on his divine disappearance day.
Thank you very much, Rameshwar. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we would ask Malati to please speak to us. This has been such an interesting collection of realizations and stories. I'm really amazed and relishing all these different angles of Srila Prabhupada through these various different devotees. So, Hare Krishna, Malati.
Maharaj, your voice is very low. Are you able to or maybe it's just from my computer end, but it's really hard to hear you.
Really?
Yeah, very soft spoken. You want me to start now? That's
yes,
it.
please.
Om Gyantarandasya Sakaya Chakchum Militam Vena Tasme Sri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskachade Satarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaur Bhakta-vrinda Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivya Patitanam Pavanevibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So I entered the dialogue just it was the end of Devamrta Swami's, because I just caught the last 2 or 3 sentences. And what I caught was very wonderful. And he was saying that the preservation of our relationship with Srila Prabhupada should be our top priority. And I have to say that was perfect. It should be, definitely. And when that happens, this movement will really take off when everybody has on that same page where Prabhupada is the top priority. And we are our top priority. Wow, is somebody dying? It's the end of the day. It could be anything, right?
Yeah.
And that we shouldn't force his hand to rescue us again. And I'm saying this as a person who did that, to my everlasting shame. But I remember Prabhupada saying to one God brother that he would come after him and pull him by his hair, bring him back. That's his mercy, but we shouldn't force his hand. And then Rameshwar Prabhu, he was speaking so nicely about loving relationship that Prabhupada gave to us and exhibited. And I remembered reading a letter that he wrote. And in that letter, he said that it was upon his first meeting with his Guru Maharaj that he learned how to love. And I think there's a few devotees out there. Some of them have departed. One of them just departed, Her Grace Krishna Nandini Devi Dasi, who learned that art of transcendental love from Prabhupada, because these devotees made Prabhupada their top priority. There was one memory. I think they were telling the story about when Giriraj Swami's parents came to try to rescue their son. And that was their mission. And that didn't happen. And it's still, even though they didn't get what they thought they wanted, they left feeling very satisfied and pleased. So Prabhupada's servant said, Srila Prabhupada, everyone just loves you. And in a very grave and definite manner, I would say, Prabhupada said, yes, because I love everyone. On an earlier call today, earlier conference, it was quite wonderful going around the world and listening to different devotees speak about their realizations in association with Prabhupada, remembering him in intimate ways. But was given 2 questions. I just thought maybe I would use those same questions, although the answer may not be the same. But one question was, how does Srila Prabhupada continue to inspire you? That was a question to me. And of course, that is something we can all consider. And for the past few months in New Vrindavan, this is where I've been caught up during this period of time. We were studying first canto of Bhagavatam, that beautiful rare treasure that accompanied him on the Jayadvaita, 250 copies. And reading the purports was, to use a phrase of the 60s, mind-blowing. And it was mind-blowing because it was as if it was like he was on-the-spot reporter describing what is going on right here today in this world. And yet these purports were written over a half a century ago. And you wonder, how does he know such things with such detail? And then you remember, Krishna's talking to him. And he's listening. And he also talks to Krishna. One time, he told 2 devotees, I believe one was Tamal Krishna, and the other one might have been Mahabodhi. So they were having a darshan with Srila Prabhupada. And he asked them for a particular verse. And each one was looking to the other, expecting the other is going to come out with the verse. But then Prabhupada realized that neither one of them knew that verse. So he said, you have to read my books. They assured him, yes, we were reading your books. He says, and study. So you have to study the books so you know each verse and chapter. He said, just like the lawyer, he studies his law books. He knows them verse and chapter, and that way he can defeat the opponents. So in the same way, in our preaching, we can't expect people to just come up and agree with us. So we have to be well-versed in the knowledge which is being given to us by Srila Prabhupada, by Krishna in his books. So then he said, even I read my own books. And he could sense a little sense of surprise. And he said, do you know why I read my own books? Because every time I read my books, actually, they're not my books. But every time I read these books, I learn something new. When I sit down to write, Krishna comes and speaks to me, dictates to me in my ear, and I simply write what he's telling me. So when I heard that, it was just like the closest I can say that I ever came to some transcendental ecstasy, because it was just so extraordinary to imagine Srila Prabhupada having Krishna talk to him, writing these purports. And I was thinking, there in the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna talking to Arjuna, and that was recorded. And the same Krishna is talking to Prabhupada. And that is being recorded by Srila Prabhupada. And I began to consider how unfathomable that was, what we are being given, the weight behind it, the gravity of the knowledge, transcendental knowledge of Godhead. So that is something that, and then you pick up this first canto and these incredible purports, and then you keep going, of course, to the next, to the next, to the next. But in the first canto in particular, because he hadn't been to America, he had never been outside of India. And he's perfectly describing the crazy, chaotic scene. And if you read some of those purports, it's like, right now, this is what's happening. How could he know that with such detail? Because Krishna was dictating and he was simply writing. So that is a continuing source of inspiration. And the other question was, as aspiring servants of His divine grace, this was from a younger devotee, what should we younger devotees focus on to please him? Well, just a couple days ago, I had a very wonderful conversation with a younger devotee. But I wasn't imposing anything on her. I was trying to find out from her what it is that, as younger devotees, they would wish to hear or know from Prabhupada disciples before we all exit. And her response, first she said, that's a great question. And I said, so what does it mean, a great question? And she said, well, sometimes it's just a filler, so you can think about what you actually want to say. But then she said very clearly that as young persons coming into this movement, they want faith, and they want to be inspired by faith. And sometimes it's awkward. They want a community, and they want faith in that community. And they want, most of all, faith that Krishna consciousness really works. And she was telling me that sometimes older devotees, and not always older, but devotees are very casual in their speech, and a tendency to speak harshly about others, about those in service roles, about the managers or the GBCs or so many things, speak harshly. And she said, this is so perplexing, it's so bewildering. And it decreases faith. You don't know where to align yourself. That was one thing. And then she was explaining how it's important to try to understand that what is the potential of their lives in Krishna consciousness. Because gone are the days where you just dropped out and tuned in. College dropout myself. I attended you have to take these obligatory classes, and one of them was Psychology 101, and that was like the most dreaded class, to sit there and hear somebody babbling away about who knows what. And one day I just thought, this is it. I can't stay here. So when I left the class that day, I'm walking down the stairs with my books, and I placed my books on a bench and walked off the campus, and I never returned. And by Krishna's mercy, I was able to, it wasn't a smooth, instant thing, but from that situation, I came into contact with His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada never disappointed us. Just like Rameshwar Prabhu was mentioning how much he wishes he could be smashed again by Srila Prabhupada. Because those smashes and crashes from Srila Prabhupada were simply ecstatic, even when they were painful. Because they came with love, they were delivered with love. So I'm hoping that somehow or other, as senior devotees walking out the door, one after the other, that if we could do something in service of Prabhupada to help younger people coming in, not even younger people, older people are coming too. A 69-year-old lady just joined in Vrindavan, left her home state of Indiana, living in the ashram. She came for she tried it out. She came first, spent a week, 9 days, and made that decision. So anybody who comes, they're coming because Krishna, because Super Soul has guided them here, and because of the presence of Srila Prabhupada. So we should be very careful to protect these people from unnecessary prajalpa in the name. Sometimes it's like people think, well, you have to be honest. You have to speak the truth. But the truth is Krishna. And the truth is Srila Prabhupada led us to Krishna. And we should try our best not to do anything that turns anyone away from Krishna. And that would be a wonderful service to Srila Prabhupada and his mission. Hare Krishna.
Each one of these different talks is like a complete world in itself. I'm hoping to take all these and put them on YouTube after it's finished as one long collective upload. And I'll put beneath the YouTube square where you see the image or the video beneath that, I will put, you know, the list of devotee names with a little blue time next to it. You click on that and go to the time spot where the devotee actually spoke. And, you know, so you can actually listen to particular devotees that you're interested in hearing, but also you can use it as a bookmark. You can hear the first three devotees and then the next three, et cetera, like that, if you care to. I have nothing much of any significance to add, but I would like to call Bhakti Prabhupada Damodar Swami to the front and center, and he has asked, we have asked him, and he's gratefully accepted to speak something to us. Hare Krishna, Bhakti Prabhupada, are you there? You can unmute yourself. Can you figure out how to unmute yourself? Oh,
Did
there
I
you-
unmute finally? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So you hear me?
Just barely. You're coming in pretty weak.
How about now? A little better?
Mm,
Not too much.
yeah, not too much better. Tiny bit better.
I'm on a different planet or something. All right. Let's see if I can do something here. Well, I don't know what else I can do. I'm not,
Oh, now you sound better.
oh, that's great. Om Jnana Jananjana Shalakya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Anyway, it's a great honor for me to somehow or another, maybe it's Chandrasekhara Swami's mercy, to be allowed to participate in the same forum or roster with such exalted personalities as all my senior god brothers and god sisters. I was reading in Caitanya Charitamrita, coincidentally, I suppose, that Haridas Thakur, this is in the Glories of Haridas Thakur, section Antya-lila, chapter 3, and text 50, that Lord Chaitanya was very much unhappy because he wanted to know how the Malechas and Yavanas could be saved, could be redeemed, and liberated from the lower modes of nature, which so blatantly, in fact, explained in the purport that Yavana doesn't just mean a certain part of the world or a certain race. It means a certain low culture, typified by eating the cow and performing other sinful activities. He also threw in the term malechas. So Yavanas and malechas, just as there could be Aryans outside of Germany or outside of India, but there could also be lots and lots of Yavanas and malechas all over the place. And those are us, in many of our cases, coming from the Wild West, and still, at least in my own case, somewhat handicapped by being brought up as a Western genuine Yavana or Malecha, or both of them. So Lord Chaitanya was unhappy, and he's asking Haridas Thakur, how can they be saved? How can they be uplifted? And Srila Prabhupada, in these purports, in this section, he makes a very important point that real service is to help Lord Chaitanya become relieved of his unhappiness. it kind of reminds us also of Prahlad Maharaj, so ched ditvam imutachet. So what is it? He's not unhappy, but he's unhappy because of the unhappiness of others. Sava dukkha dukhi, we hear. So Srila Prabhupada in the purports, he really gives a very inside look at the feel, actually, of the mood and mission of Srila Prabhupada, of his mood and mission, is to help Lord Chaitanya become relieved. And how can one help if one himself must be an expansion of Lord Chaitanya, must be an emissary of Lord Chaitanya, who also feels exactly the same way. And Prabhupada makes the point very strongly in 2 or 3 purports in that section, which I don't have time to read, but I was very inspired by it. And I also recognized that it does bring out the mood and mission of Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada. And I guess my contribution this evening is to mention how, as many of us, but at the very, very get-go of the movement, I don't know, Prabhupada writes in one of the purports, these Malechas and Yavanas, they're coming to us and they're becoming purified and they're becoming Vaishnavas and devotees. Prabhupada even told Allen Ginsberg, when the poet said, "You really think you could make these hippies into Vaishnavas?" And Prabhupada said, and it might seem like he's reversing the hierarchy here, but Prabhupada told Allen Ginsberg, who knew something about India and Indian culture, although he was our great leader of degradation, but he was also quite intellectual and, of course, a great poet. And and Prabhupada answered, yes, and not only that, we'll also make them brahmanas. And then, I think this is even in Lilamrita and Prabhupada, and Allen Ginsberg was kind of skeptical and consulted a little bit with Hayagriva. But the thing is that in my own case, it wasn't something just institutional or something just public. It was something very, very personal. And that I had direct experience. And unfortunately, I was not mature enough, or I was not together enough, as we would say, or not intelligent enough, or whatever word you want to use, to be able to really appreciate what was happening at the time. But it was so striking that probably I've shared this with a number of you, but I think it brings out this idea of how Lord Chaitanya is unhappy to see the suffering and the degradation of the Malechas and Yavanas. And Srila Prabhupada was just as unhappy about that, really not happy about that. And that came out when he was not successful in convincing me to join on the spot, probably sometime in November of 1966. And again, I mean, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. I've said this dozens and dozens of times, but when I was in a particularly desperate situation, and I said, Swamiji, I work so hard. I'm like you. I also am spreading the word, Om, Hare Krishna. You know, I go around and I work hard all day long, and nobody gives me any money. I can't maintain myself. This is what Prabhupada had to deal with. He didn't have to deal with it, but he couldn't help dealing with it because of his compassion. So at that point, Srila Prabhupada, first he TSK, you know, like, what a pathetic case. And then he became serious, very serious. And he said, simply join us. We will solve all your problems. And then where I'm going with this is a particular moment when he handed me some cloth, Brahmananda Prabhu, the late Brahmananda Prabhu didn't agree that that could have happened. He just said, I'm making up the story, but I'm not making up the story. I was handed some cloth from Srila Prabhupada with the idea that I was supposed to join, and I didn't know what to do with the cloth. And should I put it on him? I had no idea how to deal with it. It really, I went through a lot of, as we used to say, changes about it. And I kind of put the cloth down, and I started walking backwards towards the door. And as I walked towards the door, I said, Swamiji, I'm not quite ready. And Prabhupada followed me to the door and with his hand on the frame of the door, and distinctly remembered tears coming out of his eyes. He said, please come back, like that. And I was so rascal, I slipped away. And I almost got killed when I went out in the street. It wasn't at all a good neighborhood at that, no, it was 1966, the Lower East Side. But at any rate, it wasn't like, okay, I came to be the Acharya, I came to the Western countries, I have to do it to follow the order of my Guru Maharaj. It was much deeper than that. He actually had that same unhappiness that Lord Chaitanya expressed. And in that particular instance, it came out very obviously. I just was very unhappy to see me running back into the material energy and not being able to have all my problems solved. At the time, I had no idea what kind of problems he was talking about. I was worried about, I needed some money, I needed to maintain. Somehow, I just couldn't deal with it. And I was also mentally deranged. That only, was an added complication. And I had no idea what he meant when he said all the problems. But now we know, Jara Mitchu Jaravyadi. That's the kind of depth that Srila Prabhupada, that his compassion was directed towards solving those kind of problems. I've also been reading Prabhupada's arrival. I'm sure that must have come up in these presentations. Prabhupada's arrival poem. We don't have time to get into that right now, but that also expresses Srila Prabhupada's total dependence on Krishna, and at the same time, total courage to do what it seemed inconceivable to do, to somehow convince or to interest these malechas and yavanas, these people influenced by Tamagun, Rajagun, to hear the message of Krishna. I think everyone here is quite familiar with the translation of that beautiful Bengali expression, poem upon arriving, even that not chao, not te, that if you want me to dance, if that's what you want of me, then make me dance as you like. So the complete dependence on Krishna, at the same time, that same concern of how to deliver these very, very fallen souls. So I'm one of many such fallen souls, but I don't know how, but somehow or another, I had the great good fortune of going to the right place at exactly the right time. And I was a sitting duck, you might say, ready to be given a huge opportunity, huge dose. Unfortunately, as I explained, I couldn't immediately take full advantage at all, but I was fortunate enough to stay in touch with Srila Prabhupada and had some very sweet interactions. And with hindsight, hindsight is always 20/20. With hindsight, each of those interactions shows how, in such a tactful and loving way, Srila Prabhupada was, in one sense, hiding or the depth of his mission, the depth of what he of his concern. He was so tactful. I know a lot of devotees. We were just hearing Malati Mataji was repeating that Rameshwar Prabhu was saying he wished he could get smashed by Prabhupada again. Well, I was too fragile to get smashed, but rather I got treated with kid gloves. I was treated very, very gently by Srila Prabhupada, even though I was so offensive. And thank you for allowing me to share a few moments of this. And I'm going to continue to listen. I'm and being, what do they call that? A crow amongst swans. So let me hear some more of the swans now that the crow has made a few sounds. Thank you, Chandrasekhara Swami, for inviting me. Hare Krishna.
So thank you, Prabhupada Damodar Swami. This has been a very nice session. It's pretty much drawing to a close. We have one speaker via recorded message, but I noticed that Devi Deva is among us, and I wondered if by any chance he wanted to say something while he was there. Is he still there?
Yeah, I'm here, Chandrasekhara Prabhu.
Would you like to say something for the group?
I just wanted to share a few thoughts.
Can you turn your screen on?
I can't, but I can talk. And I just wanted to sort of tie a few threads together of what I've heard today. And not just on this call, but on throughout the day. And picking up on Ravindra's point of one of his points was kind of where do we go from here? This is, I think, the 42nd year of Prabhupada's, or 43rd of Prabhupada's disappearance. And I also have the similar kind of mindset in my devotional service of feeling the empathy for so many conditioned souls. I see it every day. I was raised that way by my mother and helping other people, and I see a lot of conditioned souls. And I see the way that we can serve and honor Srila Prabhupada is by trying to, despite all our shortcomings, trying to achieve his mission. And I always focus on the first purpose of him setting up ISKCON, to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large, because that's what will mitigate their suffering. That's what mitigated my suffering in my life, by having this knowledge of who I was as a spirit soul and what the purpose of life was, and by Prabhupada's mercy, getting that knowledge. And the only thing I have to say is that setting up that society, by only analysis of being involved in many aspects of the society over the years, is that our society, due to its challenges and growth and expansion worldwide, has somewhat turned inside to protect the society or protect ourselves, and that we sort of forgot about the society at large, and that one way to somewhat correct that and help Prabhupada achieve his mission of getting to society at large is looking outward again and recognizing how many conditioned souls are suffering greatly. We are a very blessed few by somewhat directly and indirectly obtaining Prabhupada's mercy. But there's a lot of people out there who are suffering a lot, and I would just encourage all of us to look outward again, and those also, in my case, and in many of my God brothers and God sisters' cases, those were the happiest times when we were reaching out to society at large and trying to educate them on ways of spiritual life. So that's really all I have to say, and I'm so grateful to Prabhupada for all that he's done for me and for everyone else who's been involved with his society. He's really a unlimited source of love. He's showed us what real love is, I think. I was part of that, hippie love generation. And Prabhupada really taught us, I think, what real love is. So thank you, Marish, for allowing me to say a few words.
Thank you, Devi Deva. So I am going to finish up here with putting Bhushara on, who was recorded earlier. I'm not sure this video is going to work. It's raw. It came right out of the camera. So I'm not sure what we're into here, but we'll give it a whirl.
That is in your own development. Sounds good, right?
Yeah. Okay, so you're live.
I'm live.
Yeah.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Speaking, this is Srila Prabhupada's Disappearance Day. And it's, as we all know, we celebrate the appearance and we celebrate the disappearance. Because it's all about the celebration of having the association of a pure devotee. What I want to speak about a little bit is the importance of having a bona fide spiritual master and the effects that have on your spiritual development. Because the having the association of a spiritual master, that's personal. That's a lot different than studying philosophy or getting a nice understanding in a philosophical sense. And having the personal association and the personal guidance, that's how attachment to the spiritual master develops. And attachment to the spiritual master is what we call love also. So when that attachment and love for the spiritual master is developed and matured, then because of the grace of the spiritual master, one can make spiritual advancement. You cannot just love the philosophy. Somebody say, oh, I love the philosophy. It's not actually realistic, We can develop love for the persons, devotees, and the personality of God. That's how the love develops, by association and by practice. And in an advanced stage, the love and the ecstasy is the same thing. Not that love is a small thing over here and our ecstasy is a big thing over here. No, they're the same thing. And that can develop by association, by practice. We have to follow the lead. This is how we make spiritual advancement. We may not be spiritually advanced in the beginning ourselves. Generally, that is the case. Even for Srila Prabhupada is a good example. He was born a Vaishnava in a pure devotee, his father, his mother, a pure devotee home. And so from the very beginning of his life, he had all of this guidance. But we find that also Srila Prabhupada was a pure devotee. He still had to take shelter of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So although somebody may be qualified, he still has to find the bona fide spiritual master to make his life perfect. And that is the way Krishna directs us to do. If you want to learn the truth, just try to approach a bona fide spiritual master. So that formula has been around since the beginning of time. And so one who is wise, he can take shelter of Krishna's teaching that you have to find the bona fide spiritual master. As soon as you are genuine, if you're genuine, then the spiritual, bona fide spiritual master you will find by Krishna's arrangement. It is said that by the grace of Krishna, that's how one gets a bona fide spiritual master. When you have a bona fide spiritual master, you're not on the level of mental concoction. Whatever you think, because the conditioned soul, the mind is contaminated. So how are you going to find perfect knowledge with a contaminated mind? So that is where your mind and your consciousness become purified by taking shelter of the spiritual master. Then you can learn the importance of taking shelter of the spiritual master. You learn the importance of the Lord's devotee. You cannot go toward the Lord unless you take shelter of his devotee. And that's why Prabhupada said, if you love me, you love my dog. So that is Krishna's test. Krishna's test is not that you approach him and you love him. That everybody loves God. But Krishna's test is that actually a qualified person. And do you have actually a favorable attitude towards your brothers and sisters or your fellow devotee God brothers? Because that is what God is looking at. The total development of the devotee on the whole. And that is the development is a complete person that's able to benefit others and help others in a genuine way. Just like Srila Prabhupada helped us. Where would we be without Srila Prabhupada? And so this is how Krishna is giving himself, by giving association with his pure devotees. And in their company, you can find, you can get them to love you. Then you'll be going somewhere. But if you don't have devotees to love you and to care for you and to guide you, then you're alone. Spiritual life is not being alone. Spiritual life is being with the spiritual master, being with the devotees, and being with Krishna, and helping people in general, and being disposed to living entities in general. And that makes you a better person. A good person is not only for themselves. Like we saw in Srila Prabhupada, he was an older person, but still he had it in him to travel so far with no facility to give it to us. So that is the real quality of a devotee. And you cannot just learn that in a philosophical way. You have to get the experience of being with somebody like that. And being in, that's what's called devotee association. So you associate with the spiritual master, you're very fortunate to get that association. You associate with your God brothers, God sisters, you're very fortunate to get that association. And you'll see, the more association you get, quality association, that how the love and the ecstasy will develop from that. And that is the value of the Srila Prabhupada association and the association of the bona fide spiritual master in general. And so Prabhupada has already done his work. And he's already moved on. Now we have to follow in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps and do the needy. What has to be done to benefit others. And that'll make Srila Prabhupada proud. So I'm not speaking too long. I just want to give the essential points that are there in association with the bona fide spiritual master. We have to cling to that, cling to your God sisters and your God brothers association, and always be available to help other devotees and like I say, living entities in general, in a loving way, in a kind way. And I'm sure Krishna will bless you. You will end up going to the spiritual world. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All right, so this brings us to the close of our program today at 9 o'clock and 8 minutes after. And I really do thank all of our presenters who joined us today. It was a very interesting collection of Prabhupada disciples of various types of viewpoints. And there was a lot of things to think about. We will try to, as I say, in the next week or so, upload this to my YouTube channel, which is Forest Dwellers 108. And I'll make the URL available to all those who spoke. And I'll also make the URL available to those who are associated with Radha Govinda Mandir and so forth. So if you want to find out or to see it when it gets uploaded to YouTube, you probably better give me about a week or two before I can find the time to do some editing and make it happen. And then you can look on my YouTube channel, which is Forest Dwellers, one word, space, and then the number 108, Forest Dwellers, space, 108. So thank you all. And we will see each other in our various services and go on serving Prabhupada and trying to understand how to really follow in his footsteps and do what we need to do. All right. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.